Good morning, everybody. I hope this is going now. Let me get the link over to Mark so we can get this going and see what happens. Hope everybody's having a great day. And I hope this works. Most importantly, I hope this works. So let's see if Mark comes in. And hopefully everything is smooth. I hope. Every time, I always feel like a deer in the headlights. Good morning, everybody. So let's see. Mark is sending out links and should be joining us soon, like momentarily. Yes, I think this is working. I hope everybody had a great weekend. A lot going on in the weed world. Hopefully all going for the better.
Can you hear me, buddy?
This is great.
Hey, Todd, can you hear me?
Yes, let me just get my headphones to where they should be.
Welcome, everybody. 103. How's everyone doing?
Doing good, buddy.
Hello,
Where are you at in the world?
I am in the Dominican Republic. Just lots of crazy drama this morning, trying to get Hash Church really opened up the 5 times to add all of your names so I could send it to you. And if someone sends me a new message while I'm opening a new message that I would have all 12 names, 10 names listed, and then they would disappear. Oh, a little bit of Facebook drama. My email's not going out. We're going to have to make sure that works because, the link's not working.
The link's fine. I got it. Good morning, Skunk Man.
I like the illegally alive sweatshirt there.
Yes, shout out to Colton's crew there because it looks like Bubble Man froze up there for a sec. Yeah, Colton had these to support.
Oh, now I'll say howdy with my mic actually
So
working.
I got a bit of a problem. My email will not email.
Okay, Todd, from what I could get, his email is not.
And if I can send you Mark's email.
Okay, yeah, you can do whatever you need to, Mark. I'll figure it out. Just tell me where you want to send it. So how you doing, Sam? How's Amsterdam?
It's still here.
These technical difficulties.
Still wet, still cold? What's up?
Well, it's been a little bit sunny. I mean, it was 16 the other day, which is what, like 75 or something?
I was about to say, is that Celsius or Fahrenheit there, Sam?
Yeah, it's real temperature, you know, like they have.
Fucking real. This is crazy. And on that lane. So Todd, when I'm copying the link,
Want me to send the link again, sir?
yeah, but not which I don't know if you know who everyone is, but I can list them off here while we're live.
Here you go. Hold on. Let me see. Let me try to do this one more time with you.
Joy Beckerman needs the email. Yeah, I don't know why. So I'm gonna quit that. Oh, it actually won't even go force quit. And boom.
It always works if
email
everybody's watching.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Well, I'm trying to get it out to
the
email.
Everything I say is delayed by 25 seconds, and I just won't be able to probably be a part of this today, but let's see if I can help get it all organized. All right.
Well, in the meantime, people, I can read off some IACM news. in the downtime here, medical cannabis use could decrease prescription opiate abuse. That came out, a study that's going on in New Mexico. In Germany, the law on medical use of cannabis went into effect. So it allows prescription of cannabis flowers by every doctor. It went into effect on the 10th of March. Standard medications do not work sufficiently. Health insurances will have to pay for the treatment with cannabis flowers, cannabis extract, as well as cannabis-based medicines, such as the cannabis extract Sativex, dronabinol, or nebolone. So Germany has definitely stepped up. In science, proceedings from the 26th Annual Symposium on ICRS are now available on CCR. Philippines Parliament wants to legalize the medical use of cannabis, which is interesting. Netherlands, of course, Bedrocan becomes the world's first high standard approved medicinal cannabis producer. And Israel, government wants to decriminalize the use of cannabis across the board. Exercise and diet influence endocannabinoid levels in the brain. Something we've always sort of known, but there's some actual science to back that up. From University Lille Nord de France. And there was another one. An inhibitor of FAAH did not influence pain in patients with chronic prostatitis. The study of 239 patients suffering from chronic prostatitis, chronic pelvic pain syndrome participants, and different were given 50 milligrams up to 600 milligrams daily on a placebo. Reduction in pain did not differ between placebo. So just an interesting study there going on. So that's basically what came out through the IACM this morning, just to give a little update in the absence of some stuff going on here. So behind the scenes, though, how's things going there, Todd?
Giving me a hard time. Is that what you're doing? Keep reading. That's all. I'm kidding.
Okay. Well, I've actually gone through the IACM news. That's absolutely yeah. Okay. All right. So
Stop this. So why don't we?
I know today we're going to be discussing hemp.
I just sent it to John, and hopefully he's getting in. And I did send it to Mark, but that didn't work. But Mark, I sent it out to the email that you just asked me to send it to as well.
Well, I'll do my best and keep my camera off and make sure everything works out. But I don't hear most of what you guys are saying, and the link that we're sending out to all the people that would be joining us today is also not working. So we'll see if we can get a little. This is loose. We're not going to get upset. We'll be back next week, and we'll have a great episode for you guys when I actually have an internet that's not third world.
Okay. I love this. It's always so much fun on Sunday mornings. All right. I just sent it to John again.
We try our we're going to give it a go. We're going to continue to keep trying and continue to get everyone in here, but link out. So all the people I was going to email the link to, I'm unable to, and I guess the majority of our panel, it's not working for it. Go ahead, Sam.
What happens if you send the list of emails to all of us and we try sending it out to other people? Does that help, or is it the link is fundamentally
Computer won't
broken?
email. Yeah, my computer won't let me send an email, so I'd actually have to go into my email, type each person's email, copy them as I type them, paste it. I'm on vacation, but we'll figure something out. Yeah, they're going to hold down the chat. They said, enjoy on YouTube. The whole panel can't get on. Well, we got the core here. We got Etienne.
And I'll make a joke
Got
about
watching
it.
live. Yes, we could make a joke about it. Did you see the post, Skunk Man Sam, in regards to our guest, Joy Beckerman, today?
Yes. Yeah, I saw about her, correct?
Did you? I invited Richard on just because he has a huge problem with her and started a big sort of stink in the thread. I thought, well, let's invite Richard on, but he doesn't. He says it's not, even though I do believe it is his circus. He refuses to be a part of it, but it would have been nice to have him on and be able to ask the questions to Joy to see. Yes, it's always the same thing. I saw someone say that she's trying to kill CBD because her partner's Donnie Wershafter and he owns $22 million. Just all this crap. I don't know about it. I'm not saying it's real. It's not real. I'm just like, wow. I woke up this morning to look at all this and was like, this should be a good everyone in.
Hey, Mark, you sent just the link that's on top of this screen, the main screen, correct?
Yes.
Good.
It worked for Etienne, so it obviously, and it worked for me. You notice that, Todd? I clicked on the exact same link.
It just works for me. Morning, guys.
Welcome,
Who
John.
will be muting his mic when he's not talking?
I'm glad that
mic
4
right
times was
here.
the charm with you there, John.
Yes, excellent. So remember, here, I got a better idea.
Just remember to mute your mics, people. We all have new microphones. Everybody is upgraded across the board, it seems. Very nice black one there you have, John.
I like my black one. I like things black.
Well, that's too easy of a joke to go there.
Hey, Johnny, can you hear me, Johnny? You can?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hear you perfect in your beautiful, lovely new microphone. Looking.
I had to. It was just like, you made us step up. Go get a
So listen,
microphone.
a whole lot of people wanted to hear about what Health Canada said in regards to your thing.
Well, I took notes. And I even have the link sitting here, which was quite an impossible link to find.
Welcome, Martin.
Hello.
Hey, I wanted to welcome Martin, one of the founders of Manitoba Harvest Hemp Food Company, and actually my old partner back in the day with the Hemp Exchange and Hemp Seeds Unlimited and a few other little, good friend, and definitely stoked that he's here with us today.
Hey guys. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you just fine. Welcome to the discussion.
Right on.
We're having some minor technical difficulties this morning, so we're just trying to get everybody ordered to the group right now. So we're just going through some minor technical difficulties due to where the location of Skunk Man, pardon me, not Skunk Man, where Bubble Man is. There's so many man, where Bubble Man is. And so Todd's trying to send out the links currently while that's going on. So we're trying to get Joy Beckerman and make this hemp episode happen. But there's just some minor technical difficulties, but we're almost there. So
yeah, I apologize for being late on my end.
No, it's all good. We were just starting in with John. So, John, you may want to give a kind of a update on what actually transpired to you this past week and why we're even having this discussion. Because apparently you were pulled over. Am I correct?
Yes. What wasn't pulled over? What happened is I went to the Edmonton Hemp Fest. This little place here. There was a hemp fest happening in Edmonton. Fantastic event. Had a really good time. Spent the last day on Monday at West Edmonton Mall, and we proceeded to head to the airport. Got there, an hour and a half early. Checked our bags. Went through security. I had my cannabis on me, like always. I had two little vials, like about this big here, full of cannabis cream. And then I had a little bit of a tincture, and I had another little container like this, full of hash. And we went up to the lounge type deal right across where we were getting on the plane. They proceeded to order some calamari. By the time the calamari showed up, name came across the PA. I was like, what's going on? So I proceeded to head down to see what the officers wanted. And right away, they had one of meditator in their hand. And the first thing he said to me, he says, we found large amounts of cannabis in your bag. And I went, what? Large amounts of cannabis? Like I don't have any on my bag. And he looked at me and goes, well, we're going to have to search you. I said, no problem. He goes, do you have any cannabis on you? Marijuana. I didn't say cannabis, I said marijuana. I said, of course I have some of my medical cannabis on me. And at the same time, before I even got into that, I handed in my driver's license and I handed in my old MMAR card that expired in 2012. So from what I I have protected underneath the injunction, under the Allen injunction. So for me, handing him a card and telling him the officer to contact Health Canada 24-hour contact line to verify who I was. Well, he did not want to do that. He persisted that I was illegal. There was two officers. You'll see that on my Facebook page. The bald one was probably more the lieutenant. The gentleman with the glasses, he was quite nice. He was the good cop, bad cop type scenario. He asked me put my hands, turned around, and he goes, you ask me what your problem is. I kind of reached behind my neck. He says, well, they took out my C4, C5 cervicalectomy fusion. I showed him my arm. And he's like, whoa. I say, yeah, I'm fully medical. I says, I'm licensed through Health Canada, have been. I have my own grow since 2006. I have 8 cards at home. And I proceeded to explain a few things to him. And then they proceeded to tell me that I was under arrest for possession of marijuana and that I was going to be charged. And I was like, whoa, are you kidding me? So he goes, well, we have to go down to the headquarters down, I guess. And I can't remember exactly what he said, but I had to follow him. They asked me if I had to put me in handcuffs. I says, there's no reason for that. And he goes, you don't have to use force or anything like that. And then I grabbed my carry-on bag and proceeded to walk down through the airport. And it's probably the longest walk. And I was carrying my bag, holding it like this. And the officer saw that I was in so much pain trying to carry this bag. He stopped, grabbed a little cart so I could put it on so I can actually push my bag down to the police station they had in there. So he was just basically doing his job. I really just felt like when I started talking to him, he said I was above his payroll. And then at the same time, the lawyer called and they were still, do you want to go home? Do you want to get to the plane? Because they now have they made the plane wait for an hour. So that was kind of cool. They delayed the plane for me to get on the plane. But at the same time, they charged me with possession under 30 grams under the CDSA, Drugs and Substance Act. And when the officer read when I had to go to court, I have to go to court on April 20th in Leduc at 9:30 a.m. Coincidence that I got to go to court on April 20th. So they put me in court for April 20th. They gave me a promise to appear with a $500 discharge. If I don't show up, I owe the courts $500, but I didn't have to pay $500 out. And jumped on a plane an hour later and came home. So at this point, I get home and there's all kinds of rumors. Everybody's telling me this, that, what to do, what not to do. I got on the phone. I spent 2 hours and 41 minutes the first day on hold with Health Canada, and then the line went dead. I got on the next day. I spent over 2 hours and 8 minutes online, and I finally got Cheryl from Health Canada. Great lady. Been talking to her since like 2007 when I said, hi, Cheryl, it's John Raffello. She said, oh, hi, John. How you doing? Haven't talked to her in years. She proceeded to tell me exactly what steps we need to take as MMAR patients, which is really, really important in what's happening here in Canada. I mean, basically, they have no grounds to reply or say anything about the MMAR. We have to tell officers in question that if we are being questioned, that they have to call Health Canada 24-hour line specifically for officers. There's a 24-hour access line to confirm. Now, this is also interesting because they told me I can actually go to a website, and I was going to kind of bring this up here and just kind of show you what they're trying to say here. It's completely ridiculous.
John, there's a screen sharing option that you can share it so we can see it good if you like, John.
Okay, how do you do that? I'll figure that out right now. So, screen share, nice.
Yeah, it should be on the left. There should be an actual green.
Yeah, there you go, buddy.
Right now? Perfect. Okay, yeah. So I'm going to show you guys, if you guys can see me working here, this is probably pretty important steps. You go to this Health Canada website here. It says cannabis and medical purposes. Now, here's the thing. This is like almost impossible to find. You have to click on as a patient and as an officer. You don't go to access to medical. You don't go to regulations. You go to apply for a licensed producer. So you click on apply for a licensed producer. You scroll down to enhanced screening. You go all the way down. And then you click on additional information down here on a security clearance. You see this section here, guys? Right here, you have to go down to this section here. You have to go on to additional information, click on here. And then over here is information from medical and law enforcement. Like this is like the purple page now. Now you got to click on law enforcement. And this is going to give you all the information of what the officer needs to read. And he's going to tell you that you're under the injunction, you're protected, any indifferent information what they can call. So, I mean, these are like steps that the officers should have known to begin with. But for some reason, They did not know, and they were ahead at the airport searching everybody for cannabis, and they do not know this information. So they now know this information. This is being sent to them, and we're going to send this to every law enforcement in Canada so they know exactly what to do if they are talking with MMAR patients. Now, in regards to that, guys, now this is the next thing that you have to do. So we've done that. Now, that's the steps you have to follow with Health Canada on their website. You can tell an officer to do this. You just tell them, go to the website, and it's hc.gc. You tell him to go to the medical section. He'll know where it is. Now, here's something else that you have to do as an MMAR patient. Now, there's very few of us that are left under the injunction that we don't have to see doctors. Basically, what Health Canada says, and straight up, they're not sharing or providing any information on the MMAR. But Cheryl, an old friend, and I won't say she's a friend, but I've talked to her probably over 20, 30 times over the last 11 years of my license. So I had great conversation with her, and she told me exactly what we have to do as patients. At first, we have to request a copy of our old MMAR. We have to include our full name, date of birth, address where the license was issued, your phone number. You have to date and sign this piece of paper. You have to take a photocopy of a valid ID, email it to omc-bcm@hc/sc.gc.ca. So you email them that documentation. Then you put that documentation into a regular letter and you send them that documentation. Now, the best thing about this, the reason why we're doing this, is you do not get an original copy of your license anymore. You only get a photocopy. So that's a key thing. So now you get a photocopy. They will send me 2 copies. In other words, you can photocopy this thing and put it in every piece of your luggage, put it in your vehicle, keep it at home, because it's just a photocopy now. But the main thing that comes with these 2 pieces of this photocopy of your license comes with it is a cover letter. Now, this cover letter explains exactly to law officers, to anybody, exactly what to do and who you are as an MMAR patient. It sucks we have to carry this around. I asked them to take a picture of it and keep it on my phone. She says, well, you know, any documentation that proves who you are, and they have to call the 24-hour hotline if there is any question with your license. So there's things that I did not do, and there's things the officer did not do. We both failed to do 2 different steps. I didn't have a proper piece of paper on me, even though I had my card and told him what to do and everything. He did not listen to me. He did not call the hotline. He wasted taxpayers' money, and now I got to go to court and hire a lawyer for all this. Well, you know, basically what I'm doing is I'm sending the documentation. You can see in the Hasper chat, someone's like, I was at the police station talking to him for 2 hours about your license. So they're really getting an education of what's happened here to me across Canada, because they started support groups. We're going to get into getting in contact with all the major police departments that are dealing with airports, making sure that they have a copy of these letters and they know exactly what to do when they come across a patient. Because I was treated like a criminal, and it was pretty much easy and simple. You Google my name, anything about me, you know I'm fully medical and that I am licensed through Health Canada, but they chose not to take those steps. So here we are. I've gone through the proper procedures of what to do. These are the procedures that Health Canada is telling me to do. And this is what we also need to do as MMAR patients. As AMCPR, that's a different program, and they'll give you all the information on that, and it's accessed on the website, of course, right? So just kind of like a little heads up there and what's kind of going on, and telling you guys exactly what happened. Now, this has happened to me twice since February 26th. I was pulled over, searched, and released when they verified my card. And in Edmonton, they charged me and let me go. Both times they gave me back they said what was invalid ID, but they gave it back to me. The first officer handed me back my cannabis. The second one, they seized 2 little creams, a little tincture vial, and about 2 grams of hash. Like, you can't even smell that. So they're specifically looking for it. I basically handed it to them and say, here, with my card. But Canada seems to be going backwards.
Why do you think this is happening? Why do you think you're being targeted now? Or why are officers being instructed to play ignorant to the law that they've well known and been aware of for some time, but seem to be directly acting against it?
The officer said to me, do you have a doctor's note? I'm like, I have my MMAR card. I felt like if I had a doctor's note and then like an Aurora card, because Aurora is the cannabis producer of Alberta, the cop would have let me go. This is what I mean. Even though I was telling you exactly every step, everything that needed to be done. Was I targeted? I just left a hemp show. There's a lot of stuff going on in Canada, what's happening with cannabis culture, the Emery, stuff like that. Everybody knows I'm always down to Cannabis Culture News Live. I know these people. I've been on the shows quite extensively over the years. I'm always down there advocating and helping and educating. So, I mean, was I on a list to see if I had something? That's just a hypothesis, hearsay. We don't know that. But it just seems like in the last 2 weeks for me, and the first time in basically my life, I've been pulled over, searched, and both times I was charged. Once I was released, and one time the charge is now sticking and I have to go to court. And I've been medical, I've been smoking cannabis for 30 years probably plus, right? So it just seems kind of ironic what's happening here in Canada with legalization around the corner. What's happening on 420, they're saying. Now all the main activists are being, well, that's what they're saying, the people saying. I don't call some of my activists, I classify myself as a patient, educating people. And they're trying to keep us away from our biggest events that are happening in Canada here. So of course, I will have my charges dropped by then and make sure all the information is sent to them properly tomorrow. I've talked to Health Canada about it. So that's what we need to do. And if you're in Canada, make sure you go and follow these steps. Take those letters down to the officers. Let them know exactly what they need to be doing. Educate them exactly, and stop harassing medical patients in Canada. It's bullshit anywhere around the world. But I mean, as it stands right now, we have a legal program, and they had no right detaining me because I was detained and I was charged and I was released, and I was publicly embarrassed in front of all kinds of people as a company owner, what I'm doing and what I represent. It's kind of like, you know, really, guys. But at the same time, everything happens for a reason, because now we're finding the proper steps. Because even I went down and saw Jason Wilcox and talked to him because we were all about that. He didn't even know about the purple page. None of us did. Like, I had to be told exactly what directions to go to find this particular page. Do you think he would have found that? Not in a heart. There's no way. Like, how are you going to find these particular information? They bury it so deep that it's hard for us as patients to even find that when we get so frustrated to begin with, right? But
we need Johnny B's out there to reports and fucking do them dirty, because I knew when they arrested you, it was going to be their worst nightmare, and that you would end up educating them and you would end up saving many other same experience. Great stuff, John. Really, this is good stuff.
John, print the letter to the police on hemp paper. You don't have to tell them, just do it.
I'm going to. I love that. I mean, I'm just great ad at the end. I'm going to do that. But 100%. I mean, I want to send this to every detachment across Canada. Anybody who's dealing with any airports, they need to know exactly what steps to take. Because I just had a friend who called me before we went on Hash. She goes, I'm flying to so-and-so because I'm on a fishing trip. And if I bring an ounce, am I going to be okay? They're scared. People are scared because they saw what happened to me on Facebook, because I was sharing everything. They're like, what do I do? I'm like, well, this is the steps you need to take. He's like, okay, so I'll just take a photocopy with me. I said 100%. So, hey, Johnny, you know what? Education.
Johnny, can you make a small YouTube video going through that exact instructional situations, and then we can post it on the Hash Church site, and it'll also allow people to spread that information around, because you have the direct links and the direct knowledge, which you just showed. If you could make just a small little YouTube video, and that way we could post it and send it around, that would be great.
Yeah, because here got the email addresses exactly where to go that I haven't really set out, but I was planning on doing that for Monday morning, everybody, on my page.
We should do that together. And also, I absolutely want to come with you to Edmonton and get that dry sift back to you.
We'll be doing at the Lift event, April 1st and 2nd at the Edmonton CanWest event. I'm flying in, so
yeah,
definitely
dude,
stop by and pick it up.
Film it and everything. It's going to be great. I want to film it.
Of course you do. But you know what? I mean, this is like I said, everything happens for a reason, but now someone like myself and someone like one of the platform that we have, we can now educate so many people on exactly what to do. The officers in question, people in Health Canada, patients, doctors, everybody needs to know exactly, because I mean, as it stands right now, like they said, they have no grounds to even comment on the MAR, and they are not sharing or providing any information on it whatsoever. And there was 46,000 patients involved with the MMAR. I think there's only about 16,000 left, and underneath there's under 10,000 that are legally able to possess and keep growing. So it's a very small handful of the over 35 million people here in Canada that we have to make sure that those people are protected. At the same time, information on a new AMCPR and exactly what people need to do so they are protected as patients and we don't have to be harassed. I mean, it's just, I hate that. How many people are being harassed that are nowhere like ourselves and are taking it and going to court, being arrested, being charged, paying fines, feeling like they're criminals when they have no need to do that? You know what I mean? It's just, I don't know what to say, but Justin Trudeau's got to step up and start educating his force. That's his force. That's his people on the ground that are forcing law. He needs to do the education. He needs to tell exactly what his people need to do for patients like ourselves. Because even someone like Darren, I mean, he asked me, what do I do, Johnny? Well, you got to carry that piece of paper. We talked about this. None of us really knew because no one's ever told us. Health Canada never said anything because they don't have to. So they never sent out anything in regards to the injunction. They just went, well, you have to find out yourself.
So print it on hemp paper, people, so you're carrying on your hemp paper as well. Thank you very much, John. That was a great breakdown. And I want to welcome Joy to the room, as well as Martin, who's working on his camera right now, as well as D420. Welcome. D, do you want to say it?
Say it, Darren.
Absolutely. Long rip, everybody. Took a while to get in. It just worked magically. It was trying to mess us around a bit.
Here's
Look
some
at Johnny
magic.
B with his dry sift. That's pretty nice. I had some of that the other night. It was tasty. Very curious to
Fucking
hear,
rights it is.
hear what Joy has to say, though.
All right, Martin's got his camera
Discussion
going.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, let's.
Hi, Martin, Joy, and just remind people, whenever you're not speaking, if you could just mute your mic, it just helps everybody. And then when you speak, it's kind of like a walkie-talkie, just turn it on. So welcome, Martin, and welcome, Joy.
Thank you very much.
We can't hear you, Joy. You're muted. You may want
Martin has a long history in the hemp industry. I think I'm not exactly sure the year that we opened the hemp exchange, but what year were we getting into this, Martin? Was it 91 or 92 or 93? I really kind of don't remember.
I think it was 92. The first, 90 April, spring of 93 is when we made our first public plea to for hemp legalization at the Forks in Winnipeg. We did a Operation Restore Hemp to sort of make fun of Operation Restore Hope. And Alan Middleness and I kind of had some hemp stuff and were flogging it or telling people about hemp at the Forks in Winnipeg, and everybody was coming up to us and say, "You guys are dreamers. It'll never happen. There's no way the cops will ever listen to you." But they were wrong.
Indeed, they were.
Martin, what got you into hemp? What culled you into the scene here?
Well, I never really smoked weed growing up. I never actually drank alcohol or did anything. I was like a good school kid, and then but I was always kind of involved in human rights stuff. When I was a teenager, I used to give money to Amnesty International, and I always thought that it was really a thing that everybody should be involved in. And then I started reading, went traveling, and started reading, and found out about hemp, and thought that was a real good way of fighting the bad guys, or fighting the system. That if the people started talking about hemp and learned what hemp could do, that would sort of undermine the whole drug war that was going on, because they were trying to tell us that cannabis or marijuana was this really, really bad thing that had no good uses at all, and here it is being useful for 25,000 different industrial applications. It's sort of like it was this contradictory piece to their propaganda. So I had been doing business before. I've been selling stuff from Central and South America, kind of Guatemalan clothing and handmade stuff, and brought that was doing that to a business. People were kind of copying me, and I learned that if I had a good business idea, people would copy my good ideas. And so then I thought, well, if I started doing hemp stuff, people would copy my hemp stuff, and that would just work more towards bringing this message of contradiction to the propaganda that was going on at the time. So it was more about just trying to put a wrench in the works of the oppression that I was feeling was going on. And that's kind of what got me into hemp.
So what made you believe that you could actually produce hemp?
Well, we had a lot of people that were resonating with our message, and we kind of we never really came across anybody that would say what we were saying was wrong or no, and we just sort of had this. I had this perspective that until somebody says no, I'm just going to keep going, and so we just kept bringing it to different areas of the government, and they could never deny us. The evidence was there. And then this fellow Sean Cornish out of Saskatchewan was part of our group, and he pointed out to me that there was well, let me back up a little bit. We wanted to ask specifically the different government parties. There was a meeting in Saskatoon, sorry, in Regina, of Health Canada Bureau of Dangerous Drugs and Surveillance or something. Ross Hossey, remember that guy, Marcus? He came and had to address a whole bunch of farmers that were asking why they couldn't grow hemp. And he said, well, we can't grow hemp because of the Single Convention Treaty in 1961, I think it was. We're a signatory to that. And he goes about proceeding to read the Single Convention Treaty article on cannabis. And then it says Part A. And then he goes, you have to treat cannabis with respect to heroin and opium and other things. And so he reads all that part and then just puts this thing down. And we were like, well, everybody was discouraged because we all thought, well, we can't grow hemp because we have to change the Single Convention Treaty. We have to go the next week or whatever. We thought, you know what, let's go have a look at that document. We called the UN in Vienna, had them send over the Single Convention Treaty, and there it was in Part B: this convention shall not apply to industrial hemp or horticultural, for cannabis use for industrial purposes or horticultural purposes. And that was our little loophole. And once I saw that, I took that to the Minister of Agriculture in Manitoba and sort of had him say, hey, because we were desperate for a new crop. Manitoba was really hurting for agricultural wise. The crow rate was just about to stop, which basically put Manitoba on an even playing field with other provinces regarding transport and the cost of transport of wheat to port, because Manitoba was the farthest away from the ports from Ontario and or the St. Lawrence Seaway and the British Columbia ports. We had to pay the most in order to get our wheat, and wheat is really cheap. So without the crow rate, without the subsidy, Manitoba farmers were really going to hurt. So the Minister of Agriculture was very open to new crops and new ideas. And so I took that loophole from the Single Convention Treaty to him, and basically he put me in. Well, he gave me his new crops agronomist and said, hey, yeah, you lead the charge with our clout. The province of Manitoba is now behind you, and they're not going to say no to us. They have to answer us as Health Canada, and the Canadian government has to talk to the province of Manitoba. So it was basically I was playing one government body against the other government body, and that was kind of how it all came together. And there's a lot of history beyond that, but.
Can I ask, where do you see
I'm always worried to talk.
What are you worried about?
Sorry, Todd. I won't. Talking,
No,
so I'm
go
I'll
ahead,
be
Mark.
hush
Try
and
to
try
get
to
your
send.
whole photo. Try to
I'll
get
try
your
to
whole
send
photo.
messages. My whole photo. What does that mean?
No, try to get your whole thought out. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Okay.
And so I've been using your hemp, Martin, for years myself to keep me happy and healthy. Previous to that, it was German hemp, hemp seed oil, etc. So now that you've seen where things have been, where do you see the future of hemp there in Canada as well as North America?
I just see more commerce. I don't really know what's happening in America regarding hemp. I am surprised that it's not a bigger thing down there, or that there isn't more production of industrial hemp. That does surprise me a little bit. But it seems like medical marijuana is more prevalent and more it's easier to grow than industrial hemp is to grow down there for whatever reason.
Well, the laws have made it such. It's now with these recent laws, you're seeing the farmers taking greater chances in Kentucky as well as here in California. The problem that we have still is infrastructure or lack thereof. We used to be a very industrialized nation, but back in the 30s, after we had taken down hemp, here in America, the majority of our factories, jute factories and rope factories, we basically up and exported to South America or just scrapped altogether. So we don't have the industrialization to do the type of previous methodologies that had brought hemp to its limelight with the huge manufacturing equipment to produce, pulp for paper as well as for, industrialization just for the cloth itself. It's very difficult. I used to work for Ecolution back 20 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And I was the sales rep for Steve D'Angelo's company. And so, as you know, we grew in Eastern Europe. And so we were very easily able to work with, since they water retted it, taking it directly to these factories. But it was still so expensive because we're using so much diesel, transferring everything because everything was pretty much landlocked. But we saw the hemp industry really start to push forward, and that all seemed to kind of take hold in the clothing department until we saw Calvin Klein put in an order for 2 million meters back in the day. And when that was not able to be met, it basically was saw the fashion industry and a lot of people step away from hemp. So we saw a surging hemp industry in the United States that I was very happily part of pretty much collapse very quickly. And we saw the resurgence of what was going on in Canada. And so you've basically kept the hemp flag flying. I have a whole knowledge of hemp that I don't even use anymore. And it's a shame because I wish I could here in America, because there's a lot of knowledge here, including, Skunk Man Sam worked on Finola, which is genetic that would, pretty much be grown industrially here because of the, treaties that keep the 0.04% or 3% THC toward the, industrial hemp varietals. We in America are looking to you in Canada because we are a burgeoning, we're just literally starting off all together, just all over again. And you had to start from the beginning. So what would be crops that, products that initially that the American farmer could produce so that they could build a viability of a market so that it could expand further?
Sorry about that. Just I'm unmuted now, I think. Yeah, all your points are very astute regarding infrastructure, and that was one of the pieces that we were facing here in Canada, as we had no infrastructure as well. The last time we had a hemp industry was in 1923. The Cordage Company, they used to make industrial hemp in Portage la Prairie, about 70 kilometers away from Winnipeg here, and they had a they were able to make rope and twine. We looked at all the infrastructure that was involved with getting into the fiber part of it and realized that that really was a non-starter for us. I mean, first of all, Manitoba farmers never really grew for fiber. Growing for fiber wasn't a thing. All the farmers here grew for grain or seed. And so we thought that if we're going to make it applicable to the economy here, it has to fit in with the skill set that the farmers own. And they were really good seed farmers here, best seed producers in the world, from my understanding. So if in order for hemp industry to happen for us, it here in Western Canada had to be seed. We had to be able to grow it for seed. And when we were first starting, there was a group out of Ontario, Hempline. They were called Joe Strobel, Jeff Kime. They were tobacco farmers or trying to get into a higher value crop, but they were only talking about growing for fiber. They didn't talk about growing for seed at all, which really, I guess in Southern Ontario, it would work for them, but it really wouldn't work for us here in Manitoba. We needed a seed crop ability. So when we ended up going to Health Canada to talk at the stakeholders meeting and draft out what the regulations would look like, I made kind of an impassioned plea to Health Canada, saying, listen, if you're going to do this, you might as well leave Manitoba and the prairies out of it, because we're seed farmers. We're not fiber farmers. There's no industry here for us. If we do just the fiber, you have to put the seed into the equation. Sorry. So they listened to that and they put seed in and allowed us to grow the seed. And it's really the seed where you would have to start if you're going to rebuild your industry. From my perspective, you can start processing the seed without $10 million of infrastructure. You can buy a $20,000 press, put up you get a warehouse that you can rent, which is what we did. Bought a $20,000 press, actually put it into the Food Development Center in Portage la Prairie. There was a subsidized operation in Manitoba called the Food Development Center that the government helps to pay for, and you can go in there and they provide a lot of training and access to filling equipment, sterilization techniques, all this different stuff that would normally be cost prohibitive for a startup to get involved in. Well, they helped us figure out how to make food quality products out of the seed. And so we put our press in there. We ended up buying a gravity table, a dehuller, and all these different. We tried all sorts of different equipment. We figured out how to start processing the seed in various ways. We pressed it, we shelled it, we grinded it up into butter. We made a hemp nut butter for a while. We sifted out the seed cake after the pressing to sift out the protein powder. I was really the operations guy who kind of invented a lot of the products that Manitoba Harvest has. I invented all of them, I guess. So it was a very piece by piece, step by step process in order to figure out what we could make of a decent quality, of a saleable quality, and then that's kind of how it all.
What did you do with the resin? I was at a seed separating plant there in Manitoba a couple of years ago, and I just saw like on the windowsills it looked like trichomes everywhere, and it was all like high in CBD because I know we did some extractions with it. I mean, do you know, and I was in a couple farms in Manitoba and taking a look at what they were doing with the seed separating and stuff like that. And they had just had like the totes full of resin sitting there, and they were putting it back into the fields. I mean, what's your thought on that?
Well, there's a provision in the regulations that prohibits using any other part of the plant other than the seed and the stalk. Any leaf matter or any kind of residual matter that is prohibited to use. So we were very much on staying on the right side of the regulations. We had because we had a lot of money invested in a lot of everything. I had everything riding on this thing. I didn't want the cops showing up.
I was in these places, and it was Hugh's place there, and he was telling me they tilled it back into the fields, and as far as I could see in these hemp fields, I didn't see one weed. I was just kind of curious because I know they used all that, and they just kind of like put it back into the fields. He was saying because it wasn't used. Exactly what you say. They never touched it. I just remember seeing it. I was like, wow, what is that? And it just kind of fell over, and I was surprised, right? So I was just, I know I saw that. It was really amazing to see how, as far as you can see these hemp fields, and they're all about a certain height, and they're grown for seed. And it was really an interesting education to see that.
What variety did you grow the first year?
Which variety?
Yes.
We imported seeds from the Glukiv Institute in Ukraine. We were growing. The first years we grew Zolotonosha and we ended up growing some French varieties as well. And then we grew Felina and Fedora, and so long ago now, 20 years ago. I think we grew. There was the Polish Institute as well. I can't remember which ones varieties we were growing in theirs, but that was like we ended up testing those ones, and then things got all weird once the regulations started. I got involved with this crazy woman, Susan Brana, who started a company called Consolidated Growers and Processors, and she was a banker out of California and started. We kind of went through this whole process of bringing hemp to the world. And as it turns out, she was a scam artist. She's in jail now for fraud. But she basically took my best intentions, ran with them in a way that was kind of misrepresented what hemp could do, I think. And basically, I had to leave that whole operation, left all my friends and family, and lost a lot of money in investing with her in this whole process.
I met Susan. She was a real sweetheart.
Oh, yeah? Well, I think the people in prison think she's a sweetheart now too. Because
I was joking.
Okay.
So, Martin, how did you? You started, of course, growing hemp, but how did you convince other farmers to start shifting their crops into growing hemp? I mean, that's real. That's a whole other level of discussion. It's one thing to be, discussing it out in the world. It's another thing to convince farmers to shift their economy, literally.
Well, I think we had a unique situation because of that CGP, Consolidated Growers and Processors. We had a tremendous amount of media, a tremendous amount of attention, and we created a market. Well, we didn't. We were hoping to create a marketplace. We contracted 6 million pounds of seeds with farmers, and by the time it all came to roost that Susan was a fraudster, we had to basically renege on all those contracts, leaving all these farmers with all the seed that they couldn't sell to anybody. So after Consolidated Growers and Processors, I left Consolidated Growers and Processors because I realized what was going on, and then I started Manitoba Harvest with Alex and Mike, and it was Consolidated Growers and Processors basically went bankrupt. As there were 6 million pounds of hemp seed here in Manitoba that the farmers were expecting to get paid for, and nobody was buying it. So we convinced them to give us the seed and let us use the seed to make products with, and that we would give them share in the company for that seed. So we ended up literally getting a seed investment from Manitoba farmers here who didn't have anything else to do with their seed. They would either rot in their bins, or they could give it to us and get shares in our company. So not all farmers did that, but the farmers that did do that made a whole bunch of money with us 17 years later, mind you. But we ended up. Yeah.
Martin, now that you're growing hemp, okay, you started to grow hemp, and of course you heard that all the, the rhetoric that was said about it. What real world problems did you find, as in pests or problems, when you actually put seed into the ground and started growing crops?
The birth of army worms, it wasn't like a perpetual infestation, but when they did show up, they like to eat the hemp. The biggest problem we deal with when we're processing hemp seeds is sclerotinia. Sclerotinia is a fungal root disease that it shows up in the stalk of the plant, and when you harvest the seed, the sclerotinia comes out with the seed, and it's about roughly the same density, same size as the hemp hearts, but it looks like rat poop or mouse poop. So you can imagine, as a food processor, when you have a whole bunch of nice clean hemp hearts and all of a sudden there's these little bits of sclerotinia in there that look like mouse poop, people call, and it's very, very hard to clean out.
The fruiting of botrytis?
Well, it's this. They call it sclerotia.
Yes, but it's the fruit of botrytis, gray mold.
I think you know more about that than I do, David.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. So, but from a practical application standpoint, that's the biggest issue that we had from processing perspective. There were other diseases that the farmers had to deal with, and they had figured out how to get better yields. I think the biggest issue for the farmers was, how do you harvest this stuff? It's so much. There's so much mass there. It was taking its toll on their harvesters, taking its toll on the balers.
Did you have specific companies now start to manufacture stronger steel or better tempered manufacturing products?
I'm not qualified to comment on that so much. The farmers that are growing for Manitoba Harvest now have really kind of figured out how to get all those issues. I don't think there's any businesses that came to market with anything specifically for hemp, but there were a lot of adjustments and modifications made to the equipment. That said, most of the hemp that comes to Manitoba Harvest these days, and I haven't been there for about 4 years now, but it comes from a few big farms, and it's mostly in Alberta, not even Manitoba based. It's becoming just another commodity crop, and the bigger growers are making more money on it, and the smaller guys are having a harder time with it because there is a lot of handling.
Have you had any problems of people trying to steal the hemp to try to make hash or anything like that?
Not that I was aware of. I think it became pretty business as usual after the first few years of seeing it. And it isn't like there's hemp fields all over the place. It's in Manitoba. It's mostly concentrated around the Dauphin area. There's a lot of hemp growers in that area, but farmers will look at any crops. Hemp tends to be harder to handle for them.
So do you have to prep your soil any different for hemp to go into the ground? Because I recall back in the day it was 300 to 400 seed per square meter. So.
Again, I'm not so much familiar on the common name farming practices, what the farmers are putting in there. I know we were putting in 20 pounds per acre. That was our recommended. But the best thing for the hemp crop is just have good soil. Make sure that you have good biology in your soil, which is kind of what I do now these days. That's my new business that I'm involved in.
So do any of the farmers have to use any pesticides or herbicides at all specifically?
There's an abundance of hemp seed right now that's conventional, and there's a shortage of hemp seed that's organic. So we at Manitoba Harvest we can't sell enough organic hemp. We just can't get it. There isn't enough. We're always looking for more organic hemp, and the growers even these days are, or the company these days is always saying that if they had another 20 million pounds of organic hemp seed, they could easily boost their sales, but they just can't get it. So the whole pesticide herbicide thing with hemp, there's a lot of guys who grow with conventional techniques, and the hemp is just sitting there. It's not selling anywhere near as quickly as the organic stuff is. So
I have a couple questions. I've enjoyed your presentation so far today. Mostly around yield. So at industrial scale, what type of biomass per acre, oil per acre, and protein per acre are you seeing at this scale? This really is the pending of hemp taking over soybean to be the preferred source of protein for animal food and people food, and is a no-brainer if the farmer has to make an economic consideration on how much protein he could get from an acre and how much it's going to cost to get that. So to me, that's the real economic driver that's going to cause the widespread cultivation of hemp throughout the world. The fiber is a wonderful byproduct, but ultimately it's the oil and the protein that we need to feed more people on less arable land. So can you give us a range, or just in your experience at large scale industrial production, what type of yields of biomass per acre, protein per acre, and refined oil per acre do you see? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, if you talk about oil from an edible standpoint, because quality of the oil is very dependent. I know canola can make a whole bunch more oil per acre than hemp can. There are other crops that can produce a lot more oil. So if you're in terms of like a bio energy or biodiesel idea, hemp's not your choice for that.
No, I'm not talking about bio. I'm talking about strictly food. No fuel.
Food.
Just
right. Protein wise, yields are, guys are getting, I've heard, 1,000 pounds an acre, and for seed, and probably a third of the seed might be protein. Third, yeah, roughly maybe a little bit less than a third, a little less of 30% of the seed will be protein. So 300 pounds of protein per acre, roughly, with hemp seed wise, but it's a really high quality protein. And people, our best selling product by far is the hemp hearts. As soon as we start, the oil really doesn't sell huge for us. It's just a little, and the protein and the other products are, they're good products, but the hemp hearts is by far the biggest part of the Manitoba harvest economy. So it would be the hemp heart delivery system that I would be looking at in terms of giving farmers an idea of how much money they could be making if we pay the most for it. That's our biggest market for our seed. That's the biggest demand for our seed, and organic, obviously. So.
I was going to ask, how many different strains are you able to choose from? Because I know when I was talking with you, they have different hemp varieties. Some produce more seed or more oils and stuff like that. Just like cannabis, there are different strains for these farmers to choose from.
Yeah, I think most of the seed that they're getting today is the Fin variety. What's Finola? That's what a lot of the guys are growing. Well, the Ukrainian varieties didn't really pan out for the farmers the way that they were, and it's mostly Finola, and there's a couple of other Manitoba varieties that the seed breeders were working on. I think that some of the growers are growing, but I think they've settled in on that variety Finola for most of the growers. It produces a whiter hemp heart. That's what we liked it from that perspective. The other varieties were more yellowish kind of.
I developed Finola for speed of maturation, and seed yield. It yield about double of any other variety out there.
Right, and it's a shorter crop too.
I've also developed a variety for seed size. So it's got 19, 20 seeds to the gram, which is about 3 times the size of any other seed.
Your contributions are appreciated, David.
Those ones have not been made public yet, but possibly will.
Well, can I take a minute and say, Joy, can you unmute your mic and join us? Please jump in. Everybody kind of just jumps off the cliff and says what they want, but you have to unmute your microphone, Joy. I can't do that. And everyone else, if you could mute your microphone when you're done talking, because I can mute it, but I cannot unmute your microphone.
Yeah, Joy, there should be a speaker up on the upper left, and it's mute microphone or not. If you click that, it should be, no, it's not working.
Joy, you might need to click on the gear and make sure that your chosen microphone is selected, and see if you can get that going. And Martin, thanks a lot. I mean, it's really interesting. I've been, obviously involved with Jack for a quarter century.
Todd, can you?
Mark? Sorry, everybody, about the lag we're having.
Yes.
We can hear Marcus. We still can't hear you, Joy. You're mute. You're still marked as mute, unfortunately. If you go to the upper right, there's this thing that says settings, and if you click on settings, it gives you your microphones, and you've tried that as well. Well, what's up, Marcus? What's going on there in the Dominican Republic?
Hey, Todd. Todd, can you hear me, Todd?
We did just hear that, Mark, but you're coming through really shoddy.
Well, I'm going to go back to the hemp, and I did really enjoy visiting the hemp fields when I was in Manitoba. As far as I can see, it was really cool. But like I was stating, Arne, it's like I didn't see any weeds. Like as far as I could see, like in any other kind of crops I've ever been in, they had the weed in. But as far as I could see, it was just hemp. There's no weeds in these fields, and this was it was in Saskatchewan. And it was I went to the seed separating plants there, and I saw the different turbines, and I was there for the harvest. It was really cool to see this all happen live, and then the seed separation and how it was a 3-story kind of separation, how it separated. That's where I saw all of the trichomes, all of them. What they saw was like a powder. It was everywhere, and they were like walking all over and stuff like that. Made in regards to it, that was several years ago, and I know they've been working hard in Manitoba with the hemp farmers out there and stuff like that. And it's just good to see how it's progressed, because I know I was looking in at the hemp. It was a carousel car. I remember it was about 8 or 10 years ago they were building something like that. It was out of Manitoba, and it kind of never happened. I was kind of wanted to get one. It's all hemp panels. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually one of the underpinning reasons why hemp is superior to other fiber crops, and in particular cotton, because cotton requires an extremely large pesticide load to control weevils and other insects. And so when you calculate that into the carbon footprint of the fiber that you're producing from the field, what you find is that cotton is heavily handicapped compared to hemp because of the very large pesticide load that's required. And these fields basically get destroyed after a while. And as you know, some of these pesticides are causing all kinds of other issues like colony collapse disorder and other things. So, I mean, certainly this is, again, one of the beneficial aspects is not just the plant itself, but the carbon footprint and what's required to actually produce product.
Martin, you need to unmute there.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I think that hemp obviously can, addressing the weed thing from earlier before, because the way the hemp grows, it can prevent a lot of the other plants that grow around it from accessing the daylight, because it grows faster and shoots up higher. The ability to grow without a lot of chemicals, makes it that much more appealing for cotton than the cotton. But that said, trying to replace cotton with hemp is I don't think realistic from a market perspective. The cotton is just a much superior fiber, easier fiber to work with. The infrastructure for dealing with or processing cotton, I think, is not as difficult as with hemp. Hemp fibers are very. The issue is if they don't get aligned properly, you have to keep them aligned. As soon as they start crossing and getting knotted up, they're so strong. It's very, very difficult to work with.
There's new fiber processing technology in making bicomponent fibers and certainly sheathed fibers. So, I mean, there's a lot of different new fiber technology out there that can give hemp a much softer feel, not as the same feel as cotton. I mean, certainly I don't have hemp underwear on, but I would think that you'd want to be able to take some of this modern technology that we've learned to do with bicomponent fibers and sheathing fibers and be able to apply this to hemp. I think where hemp really is going to stand out, again, is in its engineering properties, because it's high molecular weight cellulose that's extremely strong. And again, I'm just completely against converting it into some small molecule biofuel, because it just does not make economic sense, or does it make a good carbon footprint. So I think you look at that high molecular weight cellulose as stored sunlight. It took a lot of sunlight to make those high molecular weight polymers. Destroying those polymers takes a lot of energy and resources that's probably derived from fossil fuels.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, one of the things that we were able to sell people on at the beginning in the early days was modern technology meets industrial hemp, because hemp's been illegal for 70 years, that we weren't able to give our best scientists and best researchers access to this great resource. But now that it's legal, we can put our best minds and best people onto it. But the reality of the situation is money. We just need you can put as many minds onto it, but until you have multi-millions of dollars to buy equipment to process and to try it all, so there's a lot of enthusiasm, but not necessarily a lot of risk takers. So that's what we need a little bit more of if we're going to get the fiber game going, I think.
Well, it's a longer term investment. It's not a short term. And the unfortunate thing is most investors are looking for the short term thing. They're not thinking the long arc game, which hemp truly is. And that's one of the things what I spoke to earlier was the big problem we have in the States here is the lack of proper mechanization, much less the industrialization to make something that is equipped to handle hemp. It's very difficult. It's very hard to deal with. But when you look at something like isochanfre, or the cement that you can make, stone that you can make from just the hemp hurd, lime, and water, is as a building material as well as an insulation material, I think is an exponential part of the future, because it doesn't give off the radon gases. It doesn't, it also turns to stone, and it's fire resistant and it's water resistant. Have you played with making any of the limestone?
I have not. No, we didn't focus on any of the fiber side of things at Manitoba Harvest. Although that said, I'm super interested and passionate about the idea. I've seen people build hemp houses in BC with hemp hurd, and the insulation quality, the noise levels, just the quality of life that goes on in a hemp house is very encouraging. I would love to live in a hemp house myself, but my mother-in-law's cousin started a company that was doing something like that in southern Manitoba, near the border, Emerson, Manitoba. Emerson Hemp Company, they're called. Wally Empson, I think, is the guy's name. And he was making, trying to make isochanfre or Manitoba, version of that, and trying to do different things, but it never really went anywhere. I think, again, it's money. There was a lot of interest, but just trying to get the investment to go into it and get that payback. There's all these other places that people can put money. Everybody's wanting money, and so a quicker return is always more appealing, and a known commodity versus an unknown. So, like I said, there's not enough economic risk takers out there right now.
So what do you do with your cellulose then? If you're just using majority of it is for food crop, what do you then do with your cellulose?
Well, the farmers, the issue was one of the reasons why they liked growing finola, because it was shorter. There wasn't as much resin to have to do, or residue to have to deal with from the farm perspective. A lot of the farmers would just cut it and then swath it and then bale it, and just store it or burn it. So yeah, there just wasn't there were a few markets that were trying to open up. The one in Dauphin, there was a guy from China that had come in and invested a whole bunch of money into a Dauphin fiber processing plant, but that never took off. So yeah, the farmers, the residue from the field is a problem for them. The smaller crops are more appealing because there's less residue, and so there's less of a problem.
I was surprised something like the horse bedding didn't take off, which I know that out of the Netherlands, that was a product that was able to sustain them, because getting wood chips for animal bedding for horses, etc., is very difficult to do. But they found that the hemp hurd was also very resistant to molds and problems there. So I was surprised that it didn't take off up in Canada as a product such as that as well, just for the hurd alone.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on the economics around the hemp hurd, but I can't really point to the specific reason why that didn't happen. But I think probably proximity to market is a big deal in Europe. It's a much smaller place. As soon as you start shipping anything that isn't high value, any kilometers at all, it starts to really eat into the profit margin. So if your market isn't for your hemp herd isn't really nearby, and they're not paying a good dollar, you're going to eat all that margin up in shipping it. Every kilometer further you ship it just eats up more and more money. So,
and that's the reality we found in Eastern Europe, just in manufacturing product.
Sorry, say that again.
And that's what we found in Eastern Europe when we were taking the hemp in Hungary and Romania, and then shipping it to Czech Republic to have it put into bolts, and then ship it somewhere else to have it made into a finished product, or just have it then put into trucks and then taken to port. It just eats so much of whatever is available. It's such an economic challenge, and that's where I go back to that industrialization. Is you have to have these industrial manufacturing points close to the farm, and those don't exist throughout United States and throughout Canada. And that's a challenge to the farmer, because it's the farmer's costs, and that's where the investments needed is we need infrastructure to come closer to the farmers so that it makes it there. It's just, as stated, it's economically not there. So you've been able to still, with Manitoba Farms, make viable products and get them to market that even I still use to this day. So what would be your advice to American farmers then with these challenges?
Yeah, the advice is hemp seed. An organic hemp seed is the first way to break into any kind of viable economic activity regarding industrial hemp. And then with that said, if the farmers would look at some sort of hemp processing or cheaper hemp hurd extraction process, that using that hemp hurd in some sort of a creative hempcrete or bedding or other way would be a secondary residual revenue stream for them. But they should focus on seed production first, and then residue processing second as extra economy. And that said, we went with a press as our first little investment. We bought a $20,000 press out of Sweden and started processing the hemp seed with that. And we're able to start generating a little bit of economy. And then we were able to, with that, create enough interest to get more investment to buy other equipment and generating more economy. So it's the advice is start with the seed, and then look at some of these newer technologies that are out there to process and get extra money for your fiber. But it's the fiber really, the money I think in the fiber that you could extract would be in the herd easier than you could in the aligned fibers or unaligned fibers. So let's save the fiber part of it. Use the hemp seed first, hemp herd second, hemp fiber third, and approach it from that priority list. That would be my advice.
Right on.
And
Well,
organic,
Joy, can we see if
organic.
your mic is working this time? Okay. Well, we're still not getting audio from you, Joy. I'm really sorry. Your microphone is not working.
But she's unmuted at least.
No, she's not
She is
muted.
unmuted.
Absolutely not muted. No, not muted, but her mic is not just not happening.
Try to turn your volume up, Joyce.
Now you're muted.
You're muted again.
Now you're unmuted.
Oh,
now you're unmuted. Try and turn the volume up.
Try to turn your volume. No.
Sorry, I have no idea what to say. We can't hear you at all. I would just say, try to restart your computer, replug in your microphone or your webcam. It could be just as simple as your USB. We
always have this problem when we first come in, and it's always like a little click on the button up there that allows me to talk.
No, it's always something simple.
We just saw a little blink on there.
Yeah, no, it's just not happening.
Yeah, you may want to go check your settings again and make sure your internal microphone's set up there now that you restarted. Martin, again, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough, one, for your leadership and what you've been able to actually go out as a leader, as a pioneer even, and actually accomplish and continue forward. You've really led North America greatly in showing us that there is potential, but it also goes back to, many of us were brought on here because of Jack Herrera and his book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and the knowledge that he spread to us it heartened me enough to, work with Ecolution to take a company that was 40,000 a year to 3.5 million. And hey, say something, Joy. Nope. Almost. We heard something.
Well, the Emperor Wears No Clothes was such an inspiration to me that my very first hemp company that I started was called the Emperor's Clothing Company, and we imported hemp from Thailand and from Nepal and sold it to head shops around Manitoba, the little fanny packs and wallets and hats and different with the word hemp on it. And we took an ad out in the Emperor Wears No Clothes called at first, for the Emperor's Clothing Company, and then in fact, Mark was at the Hemp Expo with me when we met Jack Herrera, and he signed 100% hemp copy of the Emperor Wears No Clothes for us, and that was a very special copy. We met Jack, and sort of he's always been a hero to us, and it was that information really that I guess I should have prefaced the whole conversation to start with. It was Jack Herrera's book that inspired me. I came across it in the alternative literature that I was there was a revolution in magazine publishing that happened in the early 90s as desktop publishing happened. People started putting out all these magazines and alternative perspectives on things, and Jack's book was advertised in one of these alternative magazines that I was reading. So that was what inspired me to really go and do what I did. So blessings to Jack.
Jack was such an inspiration to all of us. Like I said, this forum wouldn't even be here, if it hadn't been for, Jack's inspiration as well as perspiration and kicking us all in the ass along the way and, inspiring us. And then when you get to actually meet the man, he was quite a stoic figure as well as a hell of a motivator. And he's sorely missed to this day. There was no one quite like him, and there's been no one quite like him to come along since.
I appreciate y'all saying that. It definitely, his mark on the industry is forever known. It's ironic to me how many of the kids today think that he's a grower and that he came up with the strain Jack Herrera. It's fucking amusing, but yeah, no, Jack never grew pot, and no, he didn't create the strain Jack Herrera. He wrote a book. Jack actually got shook down at a customs in Europe, and the guy at customs also thought, the cop at customs thought he was a grower, And Jack had to pull out the Emperor Wears No Clothes. It's like, no, I'm an author. I wrote this book. It's about history. You have to learn it. It's really funny stuff. You know, what people like you, Martin, have done with the inspiration that, you know, we all got touched by is so incredible. I mean, I really applaud you for bringing hemp into the mainstream and, you know, putting it on the shelves of supermarkets all over North America.
Well, that's kind of you say, Todd. You've actually, I've been following your story for a number of years as well. You were one of the first people that I saw stand up and, you know, put it on the line. You know, you really put your beliefs on the line. So yeah, to me, Mark said that's Todd McCormick. He's and I know who Todd McCormick is. No, I know who this guy is. Don't, you don't have to tell me. So yeah, I'm impressed by all of you guys. You know, everybody here is really cool.
I think we're all just doing what we can. I think we were put in a situation where we had the opportunity to try to make a difference, and a lot of us did. And it's as simple as that. I would like to think that other people would have done what I did, you know, if given the opportunity to try to help other people. They would have said, sure.
Yeah, there's
Can you hear me by any chance?
Whoa, hey, Joy.
There's a girl on the line. I figured it out.
Great to
Welcome to Hash Church. Could you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Sure, of course. Joy Beckerman. I'm the Principal Industrial Hemp Specialist at Hemp Ace International. So I do legal support, advisory, public education in industrial hemp. I've been involved in industrial hemp for a little bit over a quarter of a century, opening the first hemp store in the state of New York in the early 90s. And then when that inaugural hemp bill passed in Vermont in 96, was appointed to serve as Secretary of the Vermont Hemp Council by Representative Maslach. And then came to Seattle with my two boys, who are now 22 and 24. I've got two college grads, to commence a dual career in compliance and complex civil litigation with industrial hemp, but was able to form Hemp Ace in 2014.
So what inspired you to get into hemp, Joy?
Well, we just spoke quite a bit about him. My very first dead show, actually, in the spring of 1990, I received a flyer about industrial hemp, and I remember at the time just my feeling was that we were all going to die and the planet was being killed, but that we should be like in peace, love, and music while we kill the planet, and just did not realize that there was any type of a solution. And so when I read that flyer, and I'm in law, I teach all the continuing legal education seminars in Washington for hemp. So it's not like I believe everything I read, but that flyer hit me on a cellular level, particularly in that, there is a solution on some level. Hemp is not going to save the world. It'll be a vehicle to that, and a vehicle to regenerative agriculture even. But that not only was there a pathway, but that pathway was criminalized. And that combination excited me and disturbed me on such a level that it literally changed the trajectory of my life. So opened that hemp store anyway after having babies, and we were still on dead tour a little bit. Jerry didn't die there until August of 1995. And really dead tour was obviously just such a tremendous vehicle. It truly was. The ship of the sun is in the land of the dark, the ship of the sun being driven by the Grateful Dead in terms of clearly this consciousness. Even home birth, I had my two babies naturally, and I learned about natural childbirth on the parking lot, you know, at a dead show, tripping on acid. So all of that was just really moving to me, and then opened the store, and it was met with a tremendous amount of, it was in Woodstock, New York. It was a great place to open a hemp store. Having said that, it was obviously a dangerous time, and I had long dreadlocks, obviously a total hippie, and there I was with this sign out with a marijuana leaf as far as everyone was concerned. And constantly the police were coming in to try to buy marijuana from me, and all manner of tourists as well. And it was always so hard to not be able to help them out and be like, well, if you just look at this guy on the Village Green, he'll buy you some. But I was a young mother, and here I was in a hemp store. So eventually though, and it's a great story, received a letter, a cease and desist letter from the U.S. Secret Service because we were stamping I Grew Hemp little bubbles, of course, part of that movement out of George Washington's mouth on every $1 bill that came in and out of the store. And I was so excited to get this cease and desist letter. It was wonderful. I was an activist. I am a grassroots activist. And so I immediately called High Times. That were the first person that I thought of to call was Steve Hager. He was editing at the time. And ultimately, a gentleman who at the time was writing under the name Richard McCabe, but who we all know is Rick Cusick now. And this was prior to his High Times incarnation and prior to his topicals company with Maya. He was writing under his grandmother's maiden name for a small weekly publication called The Aquarian out of New Jersey. And as a young investigative journalist, he then embarked on investigating where on earth this cease and desist letter came from, what the nexus of it was. So we had sent it to him. And keep in mind, 1995 at the time when I got this letter, we didn't really have such great access to the internet and so on and so forth, but he had a faxed copy because the cease and desist letter included with it a photocopy of one of the bills, and it had a fax number on the top of that photocopy. Well, Rick Cusick looked it up, and it was the fax number for the Woodstock police station. So he called the Woodstock police station, and I believe may or may not, I wouldn't want to get him in trouble, even though I'm sure it's way past the statute of limitations, may or may not have led them to believe that he was a conservative writer, reporter, very much against any form of cannabis. And what does this girl think she is, this hippie girl opening up this store, and what's going on with this cease and desist letter? So the Woodstock police then open up to him and say, we have been trying to buy marijuana from her time after time. She won't sell it to us. So we sent her seeds, which of course, as we all know from the 90s, were totally sterilized. They weren't hulled or dehulled. In the hemp world, in the hemp bulk food world, we call them hulled when they're dehulled, so it gets confusing. But the point is, they were sterilized seeds with a hull still on. They sent those up to Albany and spent taxpayer money to test them for THC, which of course they did not test for, was not positive results. Then they tell Rick Cusick, so then we sent her twine, her hemp twine, to Albany to test that for THC. Shocker, that also came back negative. And then they said when we could not get her for anything, we sent a photocopy of the $1 bills that she stamps to the U.S. Secret Service, and yay, now they've sent her a cease and desist letter. So Rick Cusick writes this piece called Theater in a Crowded Fire with the results of his investigation, and the Associated Press somehow picks it up. And it turned into Her Hemp Dollars Draw U.S. Haulers in all of these newspapers across the country, which resulted in a flood of phone calls to the U.S. Secret Service office in Albany, New York. And they were shocked, and they were burdened, and they did not expect these calls and didn't want these calls. They were unwarranted. So the Secret Service ended up calling me and telling me, and there is a great lesson to the end of this story, ended up calling me and saying, listen, we only sent you that letter because we had to act on it because the Woodstock police sent it to us. The reality is you're not really breaking any laws, because under the statute, in order to mutilate or deface U.S. currency, that's what the cease and desist was for mutilating U.S. currency. They said under the statute, it has to be your intent to take that currency out of circulation. Clearly, that is not your intent. Your intent is to spread this message and to keep the money in circulation, so you're not actually violating anything. But would you do us a favor? And here's the lesson and the takeaway for this. Would you please use red ink? Because the purple ink that you're using is messing with the money counting machines at the bank. And if you use red ink, it won't stop the money counting machines. So I thank them very kindly for their call. And I will ask everybody to please make sure they will always use purple ink when stamping dollar bills.
We had we used black when you were not smoking. You might want to because you get feedback. All right. Yeah, we had the same problem in Berkeley. We were back with the Cannabis Action Network, right? 94. Actually, no, it was 93. We were stamping every single dollar bill, and Wells Fargo seized our bank account and told us that, and then turned it over to the Treasury Department. And we had a Rob Raich, who was actually the lawyer who took Angel Rach's case all the way to the Supreme Court, he's also a banking attorney. So he immediately, as a friend of ours, called the bank and said, what you're doing is illegal. You can't just hold the money, because we were just stabbing it with black ink, and made Wells Fargo aware of the law. And then they very quickly released our bank account and went through that. But we had to do that as well. But I found myself, I do believe, a few years later with Ecolution selling you hemp, correct, back in the day?
You most definitely did, and I'm so thrilled right now to hear you say Cannabis Action Network of Burley, because brothers, I even had business cards back then. The very first Cannabis Action Network Day in Woodstock, New York, was a big march. Then we rented the community center. It was, and I have some great letters that I wrote to the Woodstock police about it, how I needed their enforcement after this event, by the way. And it said, this paper and this envelope is made for marijuana, and we need protection. But the point is, my business card said New York liaison to the Cannabis Action Network of Berkeley. And it was a gal. There was a gal that I was always interacting with, and I'm terribly sorry that I don't remember her name, but it was a sister, and I think it might have been Rachel.
Rachel, yeah, it was Rachel, my ex-wife.
It was Rachel.
Yeah, it was Rachel or Debbie, because they were running the office while we were out on the road.
I was the New York liaison, so there's a picture of the Statue of Liberty on my little card. I had no idea, Etienne, and I got to witness you and Rachel actually, of course, get married at that Cannabis Cup in 1995 and at your hemp wedding, and but I didn't know we had the Cannabis Action Network of Berkeley connection too. That tickles me pink.
Yep, it's wow, that's 20 plus years. Yeah, it's almost, yeah, wow, ooh, almost 25 years ago.
I would love to talk for a minute, if I could, just about some interesting legal issues here in America with regard to industrial hemp. We don't have the luxuries, of course, in Canada, of having federal legalization. We have these 50 little countries here. And so just wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on here on a federal level, and then kind of how this federal action is unfolding in the different states, and how Washington is unique in that we have legal outdoor marijuana. We're the only state that has legalized outdoor marijuana on an adult use scale, and how that makes us unique in conjunction with the other 49 states. Is anybody interested in hearing about that? Okay, cool.
Yes.
So thank you, sir. Excellent. So as we know, we had the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937. Then we had the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, which adopted the definition of marijuana word for word from the architects of the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act. So the Nixon administration didn't bother to do a thing with that. So then we have nothing really having to do with hemp until, in terms of federal legislation, until 2005, when the first House version of the Industrial Hemp Farming Act is filed. The Senate doesn't start to get involved in the filing of this Industrial Hemp Farming Act until 2013, and it continues to be refiled. And just to explain what that is, it's a very simple 1.5-page double-spaced bill that simply defines industrial hemp without any carve-outs for the resins, and removes it from the Controlled Substances Act. So that's the first time we started to get federal legislation, was in the House in 2005. In 2014, we get the Agricultural Act of 2014, which we short name the Farm Bill. And within it is this glorious little amendment called Section 7606, the legitimacy of industrial hemp research. And what that does is it's saying in states that permit the growth or cultivation of hemp, so it's not giving a free-for-all, unfortunately, to all the states. It's saying your state is going to have to pass their own legislation. But in those states that permit the cultivation, your institutions of higher education, which they define in section, I believe it's 1001, US Code 20, section 1001, which is great because that definition is intentional. And when you look at that definition in US Code, it describes institutions of higher education as not just well-funded universities and colleges, but also technical schools and community colleges and vocational schools, as long as they meet, different accreditations. So in any event, it says institutions of higher education and state departments of agriculture are now free to promulgate rules to start what they call agricultural pilot programs. Then we go on to the two definitions within this two-page double-space amendment, Section 7606. It defines agricultural pilot program, and it defines industrial hemp. In this definition of agricultural pilot program, it says it means to study the growth or cultivation. Apparently, there's that means two different things: growth, cultivation, or marketing of industrial hemp. And that marketing is a pretty big deal, because we see the marketing as a hole big enough to drive a hemp truck through, in terms of being able to commercialize and sell the biomass and the incredibly raw, valuable materials that we are producing. And certainly the fact that they defined industrial hemp without any carve out for the resins, and for whoever who is watching to understand that the definition of marijuana in the Controlled Substances Act, which again is adopted from 1937, it looks like a full paragraph. It looks like it maybe says a bunch of stuff, but it's two sentences that make up that paragraph. And within that two sentences, they use the word resins 3 times. So they use it twice as an inclusion to marijuana, and they use it once in the second sentence, which is supposed to be the exception to marijuana of industrial hemp, but they put the exclusion of resins within the exception of marijuana. So point being that, and I apologize, I teach, again, those continuing legal education seminars, so I get a little nerdy with that stuff, but those architects of 1937 of the definition of marijuana, chosen to be kept by the Nixon administration, wanted us to know that whether we're talking about marijuana or whether we're talking about industrial hemp, they wanted those resins to be off limits. Of course, all the while they're forming their patents. First one in 1942. So, but the point being that when they define industrial hemp without that carve out, that is telling the rest of us in hemp, whoa, no carve out for the resins, we're going to start extracting. And that's why you have this incredibly brave state of Kentucky that said, we're going to grow for oilseed and fiber. We're definitely going to reinvigorate our farming industry, but we're going to go right now for what requires the least infrastructure cost, because as we know, that's a very big holdback here is the chicken and the egg and the cart and the horse, in terms of trying to encourage farmers to grow a crop for which there is no infrastructure, and trying to encourage investors to invest in an infrastructure for which the farmers are not growing a crop. So Kentucky said, hey, we're going to do extraction. And they're moving forward very boldly with that. And they, of course, have tremendous help on a state level and a federal level there, which we don't enjoy here. Neither of our senators, our federal senators, Cantwell or Murray, have co-sponsored the Industrial Hemp Farming Act, versus Kentucky, which prime sponsored the Industrial Hemp Farming Act, so on and so forth. So they really get a lot of protection. And if anyone is interested later on, I'd love to then discuss this marijuana extract final rule, which I think is fascinating, and how Kentucky is dealing with it versus how Washington is dealing with it is fascinating. So in any event, they in Kentucky are not defending or having to protect a legal marijuana market like we are here. So they're really moving forward with their agricultural pilot program to extract phytocannabinoids. Here in Washington, we have legal marijuana. So we have to deal going outdoors. So we have to deal with cross-pollination issues, which are of hysterical concern to many of our licensed producers. And it's a balancing act for me to be able to work with that hysteria and also have their backs, because cross-pollination is most definitely a valid concern. This idea that we need mountain ranges between each other, I think, time will tell, and hard data and science and things of that nature will hopefully solve some of those questions. We are, of course, are painfully aware of these studies of it travels 200 miles, it travels 2,000 miles, and then we hear, yet at the same time, the UV light can irradiate hemp pollen within a minute under certain conditions. Or we hear things like, the reality is that marijuana has an ovulation period, and that it's actually would be a miracle if during these 4 days that marijuana is ovulating, that it would actually be pollinated. So we need more science on all of that, and I think great research will come from that. So in any event, we have this section 7606, this legitimacy of industrial hemp research, and all of these benefits come with being compliant with section 7606. So we have these 31 states that have passed some form of legislation to cultivate industrial hemp, but only 10 that have ever put seeds in the ground, and only a few of those because they have been compliant with section 7606 and have been able to actually get the DEA permit to import certified seeds, while we breed our own valuable feral American hemp seeds into unique and stable, distinct varieties that we can rely on, in commerce, to participate in commerce, as opposed to backyard plots, which we should all be able to have, and so on and so forth. But as you know, in Canada, most of the hemp that is grown in developed countries, and certainly in Canada, is contracted for prior to the seeds even being put in the ground, and that is based on certified seeds, because hemp is a wily crop that, in order to compete in commerce large scale, needs to be maintained in a breeding program. So the benefits that come with this compliance are: you get the DEA permit to import seeds so that your state can get up and running. You get USDA organic certification, and as Martin explained, it is just very much in demand. Hulled seeds, they don't have to be genetically modified anyway, but this demand for certified organic hemp seeds is unbelievable. It is monumental. In fact, and I'm sorry to go on a slight tangent here, but I will say that I, with John Rulak of Nutiva, was able to lobby at Senator Cantwell and Murray's office a few years ago with him, and I'll never forget him saying to them, and this was like November of 2014 or something, and he was saying to them, listen, I am having to hire new employees every week. I need to put in a whole new facility. Costco has asked me for this is 3 years ago, a $30 million a year certified organic hemp seed contract. And there's not that much like being grown on the planet Earth. We've got to legalize hemp here. We should be able to fill these orders, and the demand for certified organic hemp seed is tremendous. So we also get the benefit of USDA organic certification. They will not certify organic if you're not compliant with section 7606. It's a written policy. They just came out with it in August of 2016. You also get the benefit of USDA NIFA grant research funds, and NIFA is the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Also, here in the state of Washington, bank loan eligibility, federal water rights eligibility, protection from civil asset forfeiture, and a tremendous problem that we're seeing in states that do not have any type of seed program as they implement the reintroduction of this crop is the horrible exploitation of farmers who are being sold seeds by unknown sellers from unknown sources. And some are totally legitimate, believe me. Doug Fine in Vermont. There were some great legitimate sources. But for the most part, we're in states that have no seed program, we're seeing the exploitation of farmers. These seeds are being sold to them at exorbitant prices. And of course, they're not actually industrial hemp seeds, so they do not test compliant at the end of the season, and the crops have to be destroyed. So there are all of these issues that come along with your state not putting in a compliant program. Now, here in Washington, we have to deal with, our WSDA is wonderful, our State Department of Ag, but they have to deal with the Attorney General's office. So even if the State Department of Ag wants to implement something in our rules, and we just filed our rules, it's important to note that we did not legalize industrial hemp when we legalized marijuana. We legalized marijuana in 2012 based on Initiative 502, but we had to work several more years to legalize industrial hemp, which we finally did in March of 2016. Therefore, we've just filed our rules, and we'll be and the DEA issued our permit 10 days ago, and we will be planting. Yeah, brother, it's pretty emotional. We'll be planting our first legal industrial hemp seeds in the state of Washington this spring for the first time in 90 fucking years, and so it's amazing. It's a big deal. We're so excited. So But the AG's office, our attorney general, they are the ones that can even trump, and they often do trump, the Washington State Department of Ag. And they don't want our hemp farmers extracting on any level any phytocannabinoids from hemp. Secret, there is a little amendment that made its way into a bill, because we're in session right now. Legislative sessions make me crazy. And there's a little sneak in the bill right now that would change our law, that would at least allow, I was just made aware of it, allow our hemp under our program to be sold, and I'll get to the shitty, but we'll get there part, to be sold to our 502, to our marijuana market for phytocannabinoid extraction, so we at least have a market. Now, when I first heard about that, because I just found out about it 7 days ago, I'd seen trolls on Facebook because I saw a couple of memes about me that said I was meeting with 502 processors and the Liquor and Cannabis Board. None of that stuff is based in reality. We have a super side note. There's a gentleman who is has created this fraudulent Washington Hemp Commission. Now, a commission, an agricultural commission in the state of Washington, has to be lawfully formed and state sanctioned by the actual State Department of Agriculture. And he's done none of those things. And he calls himself the Washington Hemp Commissioner, which is, it's actually a crime, a true, what he does to me is a civil crime, but what he does in terms of impersonating that state agency is an actual regular old criminal act. But he gets away with it, and you can call him and he'll tell you he's the Washington Hemp Commissioner, and he'll answer, you know, multiple questions wrong. But the point of that being that we have folks who are confusing these issues, because the bill that we have in front of us, somebody must have, a marijuana interest must have asked for it. We think it was from this organization called WACA, which is a highly funded trade organization for the licensed adult use market. And so they're the ones who put this amendment in. And when I first heard about it, I said, thank you very much. The hemp growers and the hemp processors will process the hemp we're growing. We don't need you, marijuana market, to process our own hemp. We thank you very much. We'll process our own hemp just like Kentucky. But the Attorney General's office is only going for it because they consider it to be a legal buffer between our beautiful, tidy little 7606 compliant hemp research program and our state legal marijuana market. They do not want the hemp processors at this time processing the hemp that we grow. So at least it will go into that marijuana market. And so that's
a good question.
Yes.
What are the cannabinoid levels that are acceptable in the bill?
They don't say, not only do they couch it completely so that they don't even mention it's about extraction. In fact, you'll find this brilliant, Todd.
No, not the extraction part. What did they cap the cannabinoid levels of the plant requirements at?
Oh, they only discuss one cannabinoid as usual, which sucks. Yes, of course. They should be
what number?
0.3.
Oh, so it's typical.
Yeah, absolutely. And for what it's worth, the various evolutions of the bills, because the only reason why we didn't pass these bills a long time ago is because we had competing Senate Democrat bill and competing House Republican bill. There was unanimous support on both sides of the aisle for the last 3 fucking years. Unfortunately, it boiled down to that. Having been raised by a lawyer and working with lawyers most of my adult life,
sure,
they live for their law to become case law, and these legislators, they live for their bill to be what became law, and that alone is what took it. So, but in part of that, discussing cannabinoids, at one point, one of the bills defined it as 1%, and our Washington State Patrol, yes, our Washington State Patrol at that point inserted itself into the amendment process and said, yo, we've just legalized marijuana here. Do you understand what you are going to do to burden the entire system over 0.7% of THC? Please, while we implement this, while we go through this experiment, while we lead the way for the country to liberate cannabis, will you please bring it back down to 0.3, because you're going to cause a burden and a clusterfuck for the State Patrol Crime Lab and the.
You're not really leading the country. Colorado's been growing hemp and CBD hemp now for years. I mean, we've all seen the flyover videos, and Kentucky's got like 400 friggin' acres in the ground last year, and the facilities look incredible.
923 acres last year. Oh yeah.
What Kentucky's doing is first class, and they're gonna have CBD hemp oil coming out actually soon. I mean,
they've had it for 2 years, brothers, and there was CBDRX was the first to get certified organic actually out of Kentucky.
So this is the other thing, and I get that, we have Sir Sam on, the separate the rope from the dope. I think is a tired argument, and the reality is cannabis has to be seen as a whole market, because realistically the hemp industry, who would have thought, would be benefiting from potentially selling CBD cannabinoids to the world. I mean, and there could be a time when CBD is put into our foods like a vitamin is listed once we understand the endocannabinoid system better. So I think that the hemp industry really shouldn't shun or try to paint black the marijuana industry, because it's all fucking cannabis. And the reality is that it's all going to work together. And the people that are enthusiastic about hemp and how it can help the environment are the friggin' potheads. There's no two ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you see somebody carrying a hemp backpack or wearing a hemp fanny pack or wearing hemp clothes, the chances they smoked pot are pretty damn high. And we need not forget our heritage of where the whole hemp movement came from.
So true. And I think that is what's wonderful about new leadership with the Hemp Industries Association. And my brother, Eric Steenstra, God bless him, it's been an issue because I sit on the NORML. I'm a national board of directors for NORML. I come from a state with both, and my whole
we won't hold it against you.
I know, believe me. Oh, it's so I get so much for that. Absolutely. But the point is that I have to do both. I have to be both marijuana and industrial hemp. And I strongly, strongly believe in educating in that way. And not only that, I have to do public relations for both here, because to keep peace between marijuana and industrial hemp. And in fact,
to a degree, you know what though, the shit about contamination is baloney, and hemp has a right to grow. And if anyone's seriously growing medicine, it should be in a greenhouse with controlled air circulation, and you're not vulnerable to outside pollutants, which is what that would be at that point. So anyone seriously growing medicine shouldn't be talking shit about not being able to grow it seedless, because, if a bird can shit on the plants that you're growing outdoors, I wouldn't call that medicine.
Amen, brother.
And that's reality. Absolutely. And we need hemp again. We really need hemp. When everybody looks at the covered wagons and everybody going west, that's canvas. That was cannabis hemp on those covered wagons, because it wasn't freaking cotton. And we really need to go back to our history, and hemp needs to be part of the whole thing. And now that we know so much about EFAs and the proteins, and it's an obvious go-to for a lot of our environmental problems right now. And I look forward to seeing it everywhere. California is now out of drought and going into a season where hemp is legal and cannabis is legal. I mean, if you multiply the amount of households we have, which is over 12 million by 6 plants a household, you got like 60 to 80 million legal pot plants growing this year all over California. And that doesn't include hemp, which now is also going to go into the fields this year. And there's no way that people will not be growing cannabis hemp and harvesting the cannabinoids to benefit people medicinally. It's going to happen. We have to embrace it.
And why would we waste that biomass anyway? I mean, this is ridiculous. This is a plant that has no byproducts. This is a plant that has only co-products. We use every single piece of this plant and those leaves and those flowering parts with that valuable material. And frankly, just even to actually eat the leaves, pelletize the leaves. Do you know that in this country, hemp is not even legalized as feed for ag right now? But going back to the cannabinoids, it's very important for me to make sure that folks understand that, especially under our new leadership, when this marijuana extract final rule came out, and I teach I teach not just the industrial hemp federal and state law parts of the continuing legal education seminars. I actually teach a standalone one, and this isn't because I created these CLEs. It's the folks that do the CLEs that call me to do them. I don't create them. And they've asked me to create one, which I've done, called The Curious Legal Status of CBD and Hemp-Derived Cannabinoids. And in preparing for it this summer, I wanted to get to the nexus of why this DEA Form 225, and if you're not familiar with it, please go ahead and Google DEA Form 225. It will immediately pop up. And it's a form that you have to use, apparently, to register with the DEA if you're going to research, conduct business, import, export, manufacture, or distribute a controlled substance. Well, that form was in its regular state since November of 1999 until it was revised in April of 2012. And in April of 2012, all of a sudden on page 3 of that form, cannabidiol is spelled out and listed as a Schedule 1 controlled substance. So I wanted to get to the bottom of what on earth was the impetus of them to revise that form in April of 2012 to all of a sudden, for the first time since the existence of the form, add cannabidiol. And I couldn't figure it out. So I ended up getting on the phone with the Office of Liaison and Policy for the DEA's Drug Diversion Control Unit. And I explained to her, I just was trying to figure out what the impetus of the revision was. And she put me on hold. And about 5 minutes later, she comes back and she says to me, well, in July of 2011, there was a proposed rule to define marijuana extract and give it a drug control number. And I say to her, well, was it ever finalized, that rule? And not that that would have done anything. There's a specific process that you have to go through to add something to the fucking schedule, and it isn't finalizing a rule. But I asked.
Hold up, wait a minute. The whole schedule hasn't been finalized. If you go back and look at where marijuana was placed, it was tentatively placed, and they never amended that. So all of this is highly questionable, and I've brought it up, and federal judges have gone, I don't see that, Judge King, if you're listening. And, we haven't seen it successfully argued anywhere, but the truth is Congress never, after putting it tentatively in Schedule 1, it never reaffirmed its position in Schedule 1 based on science. In fact, it went against the Schaefer Commission report that suggested decriminalization and that it was safer than alcohol and tobacco. And that's what we should all be pointing to. Really, we got to be inclusive in this fight for equality. And I mean, and I love listening to you, but, please don't, create more of a rift between the marijuana industry and the hemp industry. And at the same time, I also want to say that ovulation shit about a few days is total crap. Cannabis can get pollinated.
Oh, so much of it is crap.
So far through its life cycle, it'll just develop really crappy little seeds if you do it too late is all. But,
so much of it is crap. That's why we need science. And it's interesting to me to perceive that I'm actually creating a rift when I'm really just discussing legal issues with a sophisticated group here. But I'm actually the one here in the state of Washington bringing it together. But explaining how the evolution of this takes place is that this is a 5.5-year proposed bullshit rule that they come up with in July 2011. They don't do anything about it. Meanwhile, the Farm Bill happens. Kentucky starts extracting mass scale. Colorado comes out of into the broad light of day with their extraction, mass scale. Letters start to go out when the Statement of Principles comes out by the Joint Statement of Principles in August of this year by the DEA, the USDA, and the FDA saying, redefining industrial hemp under the act and saying we have to, you are not exempted from the Controlled Substances Act. And in fact, industrial hemp does include all the salts and compounds and isomers and derivatives, and putting in that language from the Marijuana Tax Act that doesn't exist. So we have Kentucky, then immediately the University of Kentucky, Kentucky Department of Ag, Senator McConnell, Rand Paul, and 17 other federal legislators all send these letters, which are all available on the Kentucky Department of Ag site. They're actually very, I love these letters are very inspiring in terms of the rights of Americans and their farmers. They don't get, and saying we're going to keep extracting, we want clarity, this wasn't the legislative intent, so on and so forth. So the DEA doesn't respond to any of these letters until they finalize that 5.5 year in the making marijuana extract rule on December fucking 7th. And then that's when Chuck actually signs it. Then they put it in the Federal Register on the 14th. And that's how they respond to all of those questions is they say, any extract from the genus cannabis. So now we have the DEA saying both. We're talking marijuana or industrial hemp. They specifically use the word genus cannabis. Any extraction is going to be a Schedule 1 drug. So that leads me to then the Hemp Industries Association files this petition for review on January 13th in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals as an administrative action to basically fight this administrative action that the DEA has taken on. We've also had to fight file a second action in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals just recently, and Martin probably knows about this. And that's because, we of course sued the DEA twice in early 2000s because they had come up with this interim and proposed rule, an interpretive rule, to make hemp seed derivatives and hemp seed foods a Schedule I controlled substance. And then we had Dr. Bronner, Nutiva, the HIA, and some other named plaintiffs, of course, spent nearly $250,000 in the early 2000s, which is pretty big money, to beat the pants off the DEA and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Well, the DEA to this day, and I work very closely with my own WSDA, who keeps pointing to the fact, and I see it as well, that the DEA's website, if you go to look whether or not hemp seed foods or derivatives in oils from anything pressed from the seed is legal here, you get shot off to the same bad law that we beat from 2003. They haven't updated it, even though we beat them a long time ago. So they just went on television dispensing the same bad advice that no, it's a Schedule I substance to actually deal in cold pressed hemp seed oil, literally on television. So now on February 17th, the HIA has had to file an action called the Motion for Order to Show Cause as to why the Drug Enforcement Administration should not be held in contempt for violating this court's prior ruling. So, really just updating you on some of those actions. But for me, it doesn't have anything to do with separating the two. It has to do with sophisticated legal issues with a wonderful group who can understand these issues, because I find them all fascinating. In the end, fucking cannabis, man. That's all I do. I live it. I breathe it. Nobody has ever paid me or reimbursed me for any of my grassroots activism for 25 years. So these trolls, which again is really the nexus of it, is this one, sociopathic malignant narcissist that we've all had to deal with. Certainly during Prop 64, I remember way having your back, Todd, and ATN, of course. You get these sociopathic malignant narcissists out there, but I have one particular one, and he is a failed marijuana activist and a disenfranchised homeless man named Steve Sarich, and the Washington Hemp Commission. So the Hemp Commission is a fraudulent organization that would be a state-sanctioned agency formed legally with approval of the Department of Agriculture. None of that's been done. So we get some of that stuff out there, but I am the opposite of the divider. I'm actually the unifier. I just have to deal with that pig on Facebook.
Well, the internet is, the internet. But, you got to kind of cruise on and do the things that you think are right. And
that's what I do. That's what I do.
It's interesting, what's happening. I mean, I think Washington will come along nicely. I think that the whole thing is at a tipping point, to be honest. And when you are taking a step back and looking at what's happening in states like Kentucky, Colorado, what will happen in California is going to be, I'm sure, along the lines of how large the state is. It's just a very cannabis friendly place, and now given the chance to move forward with the feeling of freedom, I think that we're going to see a lot of stuff happening really, really fast. I mean, what's happening in Kentucky alone is very impressive, and I'm sure this is going to be coming along really, really quick.
It is, and matter of fact, I had a phone call recently with somebody from last year. Now, it's of quite a reliable source. I won't tell you his name, but you'd freak out if I did, in terms of, and he said, Joy, I have 25,000 kilos of Kentucky grown hemp-derived CBD from last year that needs to be offloaded. And they're growing, now they're starting to put seeds in the ground for next year. So, that's just massive. And that isn't from everything in Kentucky. That's from 2 particular farms in Kentucky. So it's huge. It's a tremendous scale. Love to give some other folks a chance to talk, but man, would I love to discuss hempcrete. I heard you discussing it, and I'm the lead instructor for Hemp Technologies, and it's only about 10% of what I do because I only sleep about 3 hours a day. But hempcrete is just the science of hemp and lime is fascinating, and I love to talk about it.
No, the building materials that are happening in Europe and other places, I guess I say Europe because of hemp flax and my connection to Europe for so long, but it's incredible to think we can have, materials that won't catch fire. We could live in houses that would be structurally sound and fireproof, literally. on a lot of levels. It's quite incredible. I mean, is that
And
Chris
that
over there?
And it's pest resistant as well. So mold, rot, fire, and pest resistant. And as you mentioned, carbon sequestering. So when we say turn to stone, what we're really saying is that the limestone wants to become a stone again. So once we slake it, we heat it, we slake it, then it becomes the powder that we use as a mortar or a binder. When we wet it and mix it with our herd, all of a sudden now it starts grabbing carbon molecules from the atmosphere so that it can be a stone again. And that's how it fossilizes and petrifies.
Yeah,
And
can
then
I take a minute to say hi, Chris? Yeah, you guys, they just joined us over at Clear. Mark, can you hear us? No? Are we all stoned?
Hey, what's going on, folks? What's up, guys?
About to say, you should start a shakedown street with that much deadheadness all together.
Oh, no, we are.
Say hi to Jibs and Chris, everybody.
Good to see you all.
Hey, Jibs, great to see you, my friend. It's been a long time.
Hey, guys. How's it going, Chris?
Good. Taking some dabs, doing some chemistry with Mark. Can't complain. Life's good.
That sounds great. I've been enjoying some of your nitrogen posts.
Appreciate. Have you been enjoying the product yet? What do I have to make?
No, I can't wait till. But the posts look cool, literally.
Yeah, it's certainly cold. Heated jackets are now a thing. Apparently, you can plug in a jacket, so that might be the next tool on the list.
Oh, where's our jar of solid, dude?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
what you got making up? What have you been working on lately?
Yeah, what chemistry are you cooking up?
Yeah, what's up?
So-
you extracting any hemp yet?
We do some CBD, like hemp extractions and stuff, but we're, it's just a time thing, and in Colorado, kind of a pain in the ass for us as far as getting deals going. But yeah, I got Mark here. Basically, we're going to be investigating the hydrogenation chemistry that Mark has a patent on. So far, we've hydrogenated THCA, THC. We're going to do CBD. I got some acetate. We'll probably make some CBD acetate. And basically, we're just going to investigate what the properties of all these different hydrogenated cannabinoids are. Probably fuck around with some extracts and do some rosin maybe and see what the effects of that are. But yeah, this was our first. This is our first white powder that we made, which is we call it HHCA, so hexahydrocannabinol, and basically
Cannabinolic acid.
Cannabinolic acid, yeah, and that's basically the hydrogenated THCA, which has a nice white solid, and when you heat it, it decarbs, despite what that asshole on my feed yesterday was rambling about.
And how do you feel is the onset and effect?
So we dabbed it. Let's see. I think 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 of us dabbed it, and it was. It's definitely psychoactive in the similar way that THC is. We'd say maybe a little bit shorter lived. And honestly, I would say that if I had to guess, the ingested effects are going to have the biggest divergence from the normal cannabinoids, just by given the fact that they're going to have different metabolites.
In the liver, yeah.
Which
was it immediate onset or took some time?
Let's try it out on camera. We'll find out. What do you think?
I'm all for science, people.
I noticed a pretty quick onset yesterday when I tried it. It was definitely pretty short.
It's different than the acetate is a much slower onset compared to the H.
Does the fade out fade as slowly out as the fade in?
I don't know. Let's find out.
By pretty quickly.
I would say similarly, yeah, down to baseline a little slower. Kind of hard to tell because we're sitting around ingesting a bunch of dabs all day anyway.
Right.
But,
you already had your own titration level, but at the same time, you had to notice some difference.
Yeah, no. So yesterday morning, I specifically didn't dab any. Look, the first cannabinoids that I ingested in the day, or not ingested, but took in was the HHCA. So I would say it came up the same speed and came down a bit quicker. Maybe a half as quick, maybe. But
and lasting about what, half hour less?
Yeah, I would say. I'd say the immediate stoniness is gone in probably 5 to 10 minutes, and then you're kind of just fade on down back to baseline, or maybe the next 30. I would say, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah. No. Thanks for having us. Shameless product plug, Baroni, Chemsys, IC Collective. Woo!
You guys are killing me. That's great. So y'all have been, Mark, I take it you've been there all week and y'all are playing in the playing chemistry?
Yeah, I wish I was in better shape. I had about a 48-hour bout of food poisoning that kind of straddled me to the bathroom. But once I got over that, yeah, it was really good. I think it was the Caesar salad at Denver Airport. So stay away from the Caesar at Denver Airport from the French place. But yeah, we've been having a good time, and it's like, how much more fun could I have? I mean, this is like chemistry, cannabis, nirvana, right? I've been trying to collaborate with this guy ever since we met, right?
It's been a minute.
So
what were y'all talking about before we came and interrupted your flow?
We're talking about hemp, getting hemp growing in Washington and elsewhere. Honestly, we're talking about Kentucky, Colorado. Cannabis is kind of all coming to light on so many different legs now. And I think that it's nice from my perspective to see the whole cannabis industry grow. I kind of root for all areas of it, to say the least, But I like the cannabis get you high side, but I also like the idea of, driving by hemp fields and seeing it as replacing trees and making medicines and proteins for everybody.
I need a break.
All right.
Yeah, I think the hemp.
I was gonna say lull in the conversation, bong rip. So now go.
Yeah, no, I think the hempcrete is an awesome thing, and you guys were talking about that right when we tuned in. But I think it's gangbusters to, I think it's just a fucking no-brainer. I mean, if you can make a building material out of a plant, hello, it's kind of like really a no-brainer.
And really, with a 12-inch wall, it would keep, in most climates, a 12-inch hempcrete wall is going to keep that indoor air quality at about 60 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Just proven, just straight up. And frankly, it is the ideal. And to your point, by the way, on medical marijuana versus outdoor adult use marijuana, bird poop and indoor, Todd, I will say that we can't, as you know, it's an environmental travesty in terms of putting all marijuana indoor. That isn't going to work either. And I have to fight many state legislators here who want all of our marijuana to be forced
Can I pause
back.
for you for a minute? Most of the vegetables and foods that you eat are grown in greenhouses because producers of your foods cannot afford the rain or the weather to come and destroy their crops and to compromise their business. And I mean, this is just a reality. You can Google for a minute. A lot of the crops are,
Certainly
sensitive crops are grown in greenhouses by serious growers. Tomatoes, for instance. I mean, this isn't new technology saying that people should grow plants in greenhouses.
Well, I live also in quite an agricultural state, and to really think that we're going to, if really you're suggesting here that soil ecology and that all of our food should be grown indoors, my God, that would be the first thing you've said here that I would have to disagree with. That it isn't a true statement. Most things are grown outdoors. Certainly, the hundreds of thousands of acres of industrial hemp that we get this incredible nutrition and protein from are grown outdoors.
Right, but sensitive food crops have been grown in glass houses for hundreds of years. I mean, this isn't a new thing to say. I mean, it really, and honestly, now if you're growing cannabinoids, you're growing in light deprivation greenhouses. So it's not just a greenhouse; it's being able to control the dark period because that's how you actually cause the plant to flower. And they're running multiple runs a year. I mean, so if you're getting into it on a larger scale, I mean, this is not new news.
No, and certainly there's plenty of crops that are grown indoors, but when we say all tomatoes, not all tomatoes are grown indoors. There are some, but certainly not all. I mean, I think that for us to take the stance that we're going to in the future grow all of our food and all of our agriculture in an indoor setting, I don't think that we can do that. Don't
No,
think that's
I think the word that you're ignoring is sensitive. Sensitive crops, and cannabis is, and if it's a high value crop, yeah, it's worth putting it under glass. It's worth controlling the environment. It's worth making sure a bird can't shit on your flowers if you're going to actually then use it to make something like medicine. I mean, I don't think this is a stretch of the imagination to
it's
say
certainly
this.
for adult
I mean,
use.
honestly, yeah, I mean, defecation doesn't sound like a cool thing to roll up in my joint.
Yeah, and yet I wonder how much bird poop and paraquat and mold and everything else that I've smoked. It's certainly, I am blessed to say that I don't need to use marijuana at this time. I'm knocking on every piece of wood I can knock on for medical reasons. I'm using
But when you say marijuana, it's about an endocannabinoid system, and it's about the way we understand how that works. And consuming cannabinoids is a smart and healthy thing to do if we're looking at science with any sense of reason. I mean, a lot of the diseases that the people that are using cannabis beneficially are probably helping with are balancing out their endocannabinoid system. So, you know, choose it to use it or not. I mean,
it's
come
just
on.
it's environmentally unsustainable, and you know, we have already great statistics out there. It's environmentally unsustainable to grow. So are you saying that
to grow what's unsustainable?
Of hemp for phytocannabinoid extraction from hemp, that those hundreds of thousands of acres should be put inside? You know,
no, I think that what you're going to see happen is cannabis explode on a lot of levels. I mean, if the people that are growing hemp can find another way to harvest it and make money, then it's good for them. I mean, that's the bottom line. A farmer needs to be able to pay for the fertilizers and the water and the land and the trucks and everything. It's just part of the economy. So if they can find another solution, another source of income from their crop, I think they should embrace cannabinoids, because if if science is correct and the endocannabinoid system is as important as it appears to be, we could all use to have it in our diets. I mean, we could use to have it in some cases in its acid form so that there is no psychoactivity.
And my point is that that's going to be coming from hemp, brother. That's biomass is being grown outside where it got bird shit on it. I'm just giving you the reality of that. But my whole point of bringing this up,
I don't disagree with that either.
That's all I'm saying, bro, is that, you know, clearly, and that people will be using that medicinally, and they'll be using in other things. And certainly I use as a dietary supplement. I have access to all manner, thank God, of CBD tinctures, but I smoke my fucking weed to get high. That's why I smoke my weed. And until further conditions warrant otherwise, I just smoke to get fucking high. So I will say that it is the point of bringing it up, and Martin, I promise I'll defer to you. I feel so honored that I get to be on the show with you. I just want to say that hempcrete is the ideal for the indoor marijuana production facility. You wouldn't believe what we have going here in the Pacific Northwest, although the folks in Vancouver, British Columbia might, in terms of mold. They are brand new facilities have gone up that have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they already are dealing with building syndrome, mold problems that they can't control. And we're talking about a construction infill. Hempcrete is non-structural. It still requires timber steel framing that can actually self-regulate humidity and thermal energy. It is ideal for the indoor marijuana production facilities. And that was my whole point. Martin.
Yeah, I have a question, and maybe this council could help me out with more direction on it. But I left Manitoba Harvest about 5 years ago, and I went, the company is doing its own thing, and I really got into cannabinoids. I started juicing some hemp leaves and learned a lot about the endocannabinoid system. And then last year, my mother-in-law got sick with breast cancer, and we started doing a lot of research on cannabinoids and cancer and how to deal with cancer from the cannabinoid perspective. And my wife started calling people all over. Talked to this one nurse, cannabis nurse, Elaine. I can't remember her last name. And then she also spoke with this Dr. Frankel in LA that it consults about cancer and cannabis and cannabinoids. And the point I want to get to is he insisted to my wife that CBD from hemp fields is not the same as CBD from resin marijuana crops. Does anybody have a comment on that? But he was saying that it just does not have the same medicinal value that growing marijuana. If you grow a Charlotte's Web or a CBD rich plant as marijuana in the marijuana way. It's a different CBD medicinally than the CBD that comes as a byproduct or co-product of industrial hemp. Does anybody have anything to say about that?
Well, look, I got some CBD isolate here and from Guild Extracts, and CBD is CBD. But if you're talking about a plant-based medicine that is, got an ensemble effect where there are multiple cannabinoids there, then of course the cannabis that was bred for cannabinoid content is going to be richer in other cannabinoids that are medical. So the CBD that was attached to those other cannabinoids would be more beneficial than the stuff that was unfortunately in hemp required to have very low thresholds of cannabinoids. So then CBD, when you get it from hemp, would be in a sense a lone soldier comparatively to if it was hanging out with all these other cannabinoids and able to fight whatever disease it was you were battling. But if you get to the point where you just have CBD isolate, I don't think the CBD is any different from hemp or if it was from another cannabis plant, because CBD is CBD is CBD. Am I wrong, Mark? Mr. Scaldone, doctor?
Whether you get it from one variety or the other, it's CBD. It's a molecule, and a molecule is defined as a unique set of structure and its atoms. And yeah, I'm still real nice off this. I just did, so I'm just coming down to earth. But you do have a point, Todd. Like the high CBD varieties that have a rich in terpene content. It'd be great to be able to really dial that into a manifestation of the ensemble effect by being able to show that you could actually increase efficacy by looking at extracts taken from quote unquote drug varieties, where you can get low THC cultivars where you're taking advantage again of all of the molecules, the trace molecules in there, the flavonoids and the other things that are in there too as well. So yeah, I would certainly think that, but once you get crystalline CBD, once it's like a white crystalline solid, it doesn't make a difference where you got it from. It's chemically unique in that CBD is CBD.
Yeah, and I will pile on here because it's my experience too that, straight CBD, because I have it as well. I like it, but without a doubt, the ensemble effect from, CBD rich strains by having the THC there, there is science that backs that, as well as, patients that themselves have said they've got more of an analgesic effect, depending. Again, everything happening with cannabis is subjective to individual, but those individuals that I know that have tried CBD versus CBD isolate versus CBD rich strains, they seem to get much more medicinal benefit from those that have those other cannabinoids and ensembles that seem to be naturally occurrent in those plants that tend to be the CBD rich ones, those as opposed to just the straight hemp isolate.
Is that primarily a small dose of THC with the CBD?
Correct. Yeah, so you were talking anywhere from 2-to-1, 5-to-1 ratio, where CBD to THC. It's the CBD is the higher when possible, and the lower number is THC where possible.
Yeah, that's what really a lot of people have told me informally also.
And Martin, I'll say that there are some folks in the medical community, that are really anti-hemp CBD, and I always have interesting conversations with them. They call it like Frankenstein CBD and stuff like that. And the reality is that I just agree with everything that has been said.
Because they're beholden to the medical dictatorship that we live in, which is run by $1 billion pharmaceutical industry, which is a for-profit industry, which is not in the industry to cure people. It's in the industry to create customers for life. Drug companies, drugs sold by drug stores at drug companies. It's all bullshit. Cannabis is a medicated herb, and when given the opportunity, a medicated herb should be used in advance to any prescription pharmaceuticals. And right now, the U.S. medical industry, including a large number of the large research hospitals, are basically locked up by the pharmaceutical industry.
And to qualify, I actually meant the medical marijuana community. It's our own medical cannabis community that I was talking about, and they are the ones that I oftentimes have to have these arguments with. They're very anti-hemp CBD, and the reality is, if you're just trying to get an isolate, we'll takes our CBD where we can get our damn CBD, people. You know, if it has to come from hemp, it has to come from hemp. Now we're talking ensemble and entourage, of course. One-to-one would be a great place to start. And again, as ATN completely underscored, subjective and you know, to the individual, distinct to the individual. But we'll take our CBD where we can get our CBD at this point, whether it comes from industrial hemp or not. If we're talking,
in the long run, it won't come from industrial hemp. Industrial hemp gives 1 or 2% CBD by dry weight. Whereas you can have modern varieties with extremely low THC still that have over 20% CBD. So industrial hemp.
It's a function of prohibition. If a hemp-derived CBD is a function of prohibition in many ways, because we will, once we can get particularly approved for feed, for ag, you guys, be able to pelletize the flowering leaves and the flowering parts and leaves and use that biomass for many other things. As I often say, if you're trying to get resin out of a crop, then start with a high resin crop. You know, sucking resin out of a low resin crop is silly, which is why exactly what Sam I think that's who just said it. You know, I totally agree. Right now it's a function of prohibition, which is why I say we'll take our CBDs where we can get our CBDs for now.
Right. And I agree that in the short term, people have had to do what they had to do. But that is changing, especially for CBD. There's a lot of choice and a lot of high CBD varieties around. Now, before they all had THC significantly, but they're getting to be now some that are extremely low in THC, and they could be registered as hemp if somebody would go through the process. But the future will bring that and all the other cannabinoids too. I mean, the next target will probably be THCV.
Well, can I ask, I mean, when are we going to start arguing that hemp should be able to be grown with, you know, realistic or any sized amounts of cannabinoids? I mean, now that we can have high grade growing in fields under 502 and under 64 and under 64 in Colorado, why the hell can't we have, you know, middle or crappy hemp growing that would be way more effective? I mean, in a sense of giving the farmers an additional crop, because if they could send the tops out for processing, it would help them financially a lot, and it would help hemp to, you know, as they're talking about now, build more jobs and stir the economy. And that's something we've seen cannabis do in the places where it was allowed to be regulated to any degree.
It's the march. It's marching forward. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's actually pretty easy nowadays to breed extremely low THC varieties of hemp. So, but I also do agree that a 0.2% limit is, or 0.3, depending on where you are, is pretty stupid. I mean, if it's less than 1% THC, nobody's going to be trying to be diverting it for a recreational drug. Maybe for medicine, but not for a recreational drug.
May I ask you a question then, Sam? What in your research has been like what do varieties that are grown for industrial use in indigenous areas, what is their range of cannabinoids when they, you know, obviously they haven't gone through the EC challenge and, you know, had to lower their cannabinoid levels artificially. What would hemp varieties be at a cannabinoid level?
It depends where these hemp varieties are. In China, in Yunnan, where they grow hemp, it's actually pretty low. You once in a while see one that has 1 or 2% THC though, but because they're not selectively bred one way or the other, because people really didn't use them for that.
And I think one of the other issues is in terms of saturation of the market. When I sit here and tell you, and you've even sent, Marcus actually even sent the link to it. When we talk about 1 or 2 farms that have in backstock from last year, 25,000 kilos of CBD that they're trying to offload this year, you know, it's gonna bubble a bit.
Well, it's way beyond that, because I know people in China who have tons of dried flowers they're processing
Exactly. I'm just
by
talking about
CO2 extraction.
Can I say, dare I say, not bubble, but realistically, cannabis will start getting treated like any other product, where it has to be, taken into consideration of what its cost of production is. And once you have competing industries or competing parties being able to actually sit down, figure out their bottom line in this, double their price, that'll be the new cost of cannabis. And all of this inflated value shit is going to be right out the window, because now you'll have people looking at their ledgers, talking to their investors, and trying to just come through with an honest profit, and not, 500 times or 50 times or 1,000 times their cost of production, which is what we're seeing happen now in almost all areas of cannabis.
Yeah, well, trying to offload biomass of industrial hemp for no infrastructure other than extraction, it went down. It was like, I think Pure Hemp Technology out of Fort Lupton, Colorado, said that in 2015, they were paying $500 for a ton of hemp biomass to put into their fractionalization technologies. They separate hemicellulose, cellulose, sugars, and lignans. It's a fascinating technology. And last year, they paid $800 for 8 tons. So it's very much, but again, they're doing it for fiber. So as opposed to for the extraction, but to have this giant backstock, we don't want everyone to start growing it and extracting it and then not being able to sell it at all right here in America, to say nothing of, especially when it's easier to import. It just sucks that it's, as long as it's an isolate, obviously there's not a lot of whole plant stuff coming in or anything that tests positive for THC coming in, but it's fairly easy to import this foreign.
Well, can I ask this? What can we do to open up the international market? Because now, we're in a situation where that is the next step. There's companies like Hempflax in Europe looking at how can they ship their CBD to, Georgia, for instance. They're wondering all of this, and we should have these type of open, equal rights with the hemp industry that other industries also have, especially
on a federal level. On a federal level, that Industrial Hemp Farming Act is going to have to, the whole plant needs to be descheduled. I mean, obviously the major drumbeat here is de-fucking schedule or challenge the scheduling of it, as you very brilliantly raised, that it doesn't belong there, even in terms of procedurally, it doesn't belong there as marijuana, to say nothing of cannabidiol. So on a federal level, it needs to be descheduled. And so those various acts have to pass, and we have to continue to march forward. So if we look now, I mean, how long has it been since alcohol prohibition has been, killed? And yet, if you pay attention to, and I'm sure many people on this panel do in the United States, pay attention to the bills in your own state legislature right now, you will see the liquor industry fighting for more and less hysterical bills. Now, having said that, to qualify my statement, I, of course, think it was a mistake for us to legalize under a vice model, and I hate even comparing us to alcohol at all. But in terms of oranges and oranges, we see that alcohol prohibition has been 70 plus years or whatever, 80 plus years it's gone. And we had a bill this year, to make it legal to have growlers that could be filled with wine instead of beer. The liquor industry is constantly trying to fight for more fair and less hysterical laws. And we're going to be doing that, hopefully not for 70 years. We're not alcohol, we're cannabis activists, and our shit is organized. As a matter of fact, I want you to know that the state legislature here and the regulators here, some of them just cannot believe. They have seen new industries come and go and form, and they cannot believe how the cannabis community and the cannabis industry has formed their various alliances, how they lobby, how they perform their activism. So we're not alcohol, and we won't have to fight as long, but the march is on, and we just have to keep moving forward. And I get really frustrated, not with anyone in this panel, with sort of the newbies that come in, and God bless them. We need new blood, fresh blood. But after 2-3 years or one legislative session, they're like, oh, fuck this. I wanted total utopia from total prohibition and hysteria, and like they're giving up. And I'm hearing this for the marathon, not the sprint. And the reality is, keep marching, keep fighting, engage. And that's how we're going to get this thing done. But we're just starting in terms of legislation.
Martin, can I ask, where do you see the hemp industry going in Canada?
you know what I find is that the discussion can happen in the legal system, and you know, you can change the law per se, but if people aren't informed about the change, or if they have no if there's no common regular reminder of what the status quo is, they just default to what they most recently heard on TV or some sort of mainstream reference, and that's kind of how people behave and react. Like I can't remember who was talking about. It was John, I think, was talking about in Edmonton how the police were, harassing him at the airport, despite the fact that the regulations have changed and all the laws are there. There isn't a common attitude or a reminder of what the status quo is. I think one of the pieces about putting a product on the shelves is that it kind of helps to normalize the situation for people. It reminds people that, oh yeah, hemp is legal, that we are in a different time. But unless we have something kind of in the regular culture to help us feel comfortable with the situation, I could see us losing ground. People could. There's just a lot of nefarious directed people. I found not everyone loves everybody else the way we do into the cannabis world, and for whatever reason, there's just an ego or whatever it is. There's just some people that take pleasure in trying to move our progress back. So we have to keep continuing to fight, and we have to do it in a way that they can't really attack us. It was sort of more sideways assault on things. So instead, that's why I liked hemp so much. It was kind of an indirect attack, and I think there's profit in the seed part of it, and we need to really use some of that to encourage the fiber part of it. I'm a little bit, we sold Manitoba Harvest last year to a big company in on the stock market, the NYSE, called I can't remember, Compass Diversified and Holdings, and so now I'm a little bit sad that the profits of that thing are going to go to this big company, and that we're not going to really steer into that, putting money into fiber industry or anything like that. But I'm not 100% sure where it's going to go. I certainly hope that we grow. I know the organic part of it, there's a huge demand for, and if we could get that piece figured out, and that's kind of one of the things I'm kind of working on in my other company, is trying to figure out how to get better results and more organic hemp in the ground. Then I think that there's a strong piece, a strong possibility for good growth. But the conventional hemp thing, I immediately don't see the huge market, the huge opportunity in that, but the organic hemp thing I do. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, the future's in the proteins and the seeds for sure. It's what the Canadian industry was founded on, and I've always understood it was going to take longer for fiber and paper to come along after the seed industry. So it makes sense. I mean, this is why also I kind of hope that farmers find alternative ways to monetize their crops and to make money, bringing hemp back into the community. I think CBD is kind of funny that out of nowhere hemp became a medicinal crop.
It is rather ironic if you look at it, because we didn't find that spike again to 2008. And then this has all been within, the last 9 years, this whole new CBD phenomena.
Right. And, and if we fight for equal rights, and if we could start growing varieties of cannabis hemp that had marginal cannabinoid levels that were more appropriate for extraction, it could help the world, I think, on a large level. We have to get the fear of THC out of the legislative. I mean, there's no question, especially now with the current government we have, that we all have to really, unfortunately, engage the political side of this and be active towards our goals, or we will not make much progress with the hurdles that are in front of us right now.
The squeaky wheel gets the grease.
We need a lot of grease in America now with the new administration. I'm really glad that weed got legalized in so many places because you have to be high for this shit.
Well, we also saw Sessions say that, you know, they can only do so much, and they're only going to go after the bad actors. And you saw there were busts this week in Colorado where the DEA actually came in and busted some large grows that were shipping things out of state. I feel very bad for those poor fellows because they're going to be made examples of. You and I both know that, and that's the reality of this new front on the drug war, is that they've, you know, the Obama administration didn't spend any money, but apparently, even though there's no money that should be spent, they went into Colorado regardless and went and, you know, acted regardless.
Technically, Obama spent twice as much as Bush 2 did in half as much time against us.
Oh yeah, remember it wasn't Bush who came
out. He didn't
after.
spend down. They didn't market what they were doing in the same way that others in the past had so, you know, boldly marketed their attempts to cut our heads off.
Oh yeah, it was Obama who went after me. It wasn't Bush. It wasn't Clinton.
That's a good way to look at it. Sure.
That's the reality.
Yeah, after Stevie D, after all abuse, right? That was under Obama.
Flat out. So when everybody starts to say how wonderful Obama was, I back that conversation up quickly because that locked me up in court for years, and that was very painful to experience. But at the same time, it showed what the limits of the federal government are. So it's interesting to see the new front open up this week in Colorado with quote unquote bad actors, that an investigation that's been going on, they say, for months, that they've been tracing this cannabis from out of state and back to these houses in Colorado. So it'll be interesting to see what happens ongoing in other states as this again, Sessions let it be known that, you know, marijuana is still evil and bad, but at the same time, he doesn't have the resources and is going to allow the Cole memo to continue to be in place. So it's an interesting situation where we're still facing, that we see sort of, it's not a white flag, people, so they haven't given up. But at the same time,
no, I think
worst
the
feared
problem we have, don't you think, is the lobbyists that are getting louder and louder. I mean, if some of the headlines are true, that was it 24% of beer drinkers in legal states are not drinking beer, they're smoking pot instead now that it's a legal option in places. I mean, that means that the beer industry alone would want to spend a ton of money to lobby against things that would take a quarter of their business away.
It's an economic driver for them now, without a doubt. They've got
more than it's ever been.
Absolutely.
Yeah, our opposition is more political now than they've ever been, in my opinion, because they're seeing the dollars fly out of their own pockets.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. And going forward, I've learned that it's not a one-directional. Like, once we make progress, it doesn't guarantee that we're going to continue to make progress in that direction. It's a consistent effort that needs to be made on all fronts. We have to fight so we don't lose ground, because there are, as things change, other people get affected in a different way. And the example that you just gave, Todd, about the alcohol industry, you know, having an incentive to keep their competition at bay, that's what got rid of hemp in the first place, right? It was the cotton and the tree industry that wanted to keep their competition
right. Rudolph first, right? You know, what frightens me more is what goes unreported, and the unreported part of this is the profits surrounding the pharmaceutical industry. And, you know, it's not a very exciting news story. You know, they made billions more today, trillions more. But the reality is they did, and they have so much money. And if we're seeing these kind of headlines that are sort of sensationalistic, talking about beer losing, you know, a quarter of its business to legal pot, I gotta think that the pharmaceutical industry is already more tuned into this and more aggressively spending money lobbying. So these politicians, a lot of which don't already agree with our position, are getting people stepping to them with briefcases of money from all sorts of industries that are hugely profitable: alcohol, tobacco, pharmaceutical, and there's no two ways around that right now.
The only way it will change is through re-education. We have to reach the people who are non-committed or are against cannabis and help them realize that, you know, the medical uses, the recreational uses, the industrial uses are beneficial to mankind. And they've been That's a line of bull crap.
It seems that people open up to this when they're pushed to some extreme. I've gotten involved with a lot of sick people, trying to treat with cannabinoids and get cannabinoids into people. But that's kind of when people's eyes open up and their minds open up and they receive things. It just seems that there's a certain kind of mentality that you need to be opened up to in order to receive this information. And I'm not sure exactly how to strategize, but almost everybody goes through it. Somebody in somebody's family gets sick. And
well, can I tell you, I read back in like '94 when I first became vegetarian that 1 out of 3 people had cancer at the time. And the projections for the year 2000, which seems so far away, was 1 out of 2. And I've had cancer numerous times, and I think that it was a beneficial thing that was hard to deal with. If it doesn't kill you, you can learn something. But I thought immediately, wow, that's great. Half of society will be affected by this very compassionate and empathy enabling disease. It will open them all up and could make the world a better place. I know it sounds like a crazy thing to say, but a lot of cancer patients or people that have survived like a cancer disease are very grateful to be alive.
Yeah. And that somehow there's a power there to transform society. It seems that vehicle might be our best chance at, so we should hang out at those forums or in those areas and be that option. And then once we bring people over, we can try to infect them with a better program of how to look at cannabis. I don't even know what I'm talking about right now, but that just seems that you people have so much information, and Joy, you're so eloquent in the way you speak about these things and so informed. It seems that we need to strategize as a group about how to deal with some of these opportunities that because without a good plan, a battle plan, we're just going to get picked apart. Our foes are way better funded and organized and have.
The other key thing is we really need to focus on the non-committed, the unconverted. It's we can strategize amongst ourselves, but we got to reach them.
Yeah.
That's a big part of what I do here. It's great in the legal states to be able to do that, because then we're being reached out to by all these various agricultural groups and civic leaders and county commissioners and folks who really do straight up mainstream folks. They don't even want to hear marijuana, and I have to keep all my marijuana jokes inside and gnaw holes inside of my cheeks while I'm presenting to them. But they see hemp as their opportunity. Their towns, their counties are suffering. We have these incredible port towns. We're on the coast here in terms of import export, and so that conversion is very key. The strategy and the unification that Martin speaks of, which is why it's just so fantastic that the HIA, I think, which my love for the HIA has waxed and waned since 1994, but I've got my full love back. I'm feeling good, you guys. I'm giving it another try here and have reformed the Washington State chapter under our new leadership. And again, God bless my brother Eric. But we need hardcore leadership to get us together who really, Colleen Cahey, the new executive director of the HIA, she has successfully run trade organization before, water rural rights. She's a great unifier of people, and she has to deal with so many competing interests, but she understands exactly what you're saying, Martin, and I want to believe that we're going to be able to do it with the HIA and other organizations. The THC, and it's hilarious that they chose this, including the HIA, have formed the Hemp Coalition. I mean, I'm just so over the THC jokes, but anyway, the Hemp Coalition has formed, and that's the HIA and the NHA, the National Hemp Association, and 3 others, and I apologize that I don't know what they are. I think once I saw the THC part, I was like, oh God. But as the Hemp Coalition, we actually were the first ones to respond to that ridiculous statement of principles, but unifying and converting the unconverted. And we're working hard at that. That key, absolutely key, both of those things, gentlemen.
So to convert the unconverted, is there a place to send them on the web, or how simple can we make that conversion process, and what does that look like? Because everybody receives information in a different way. It would just be nice to have a portal to be able to, hey, listen, now that you're opened up to it, this is what you want to download.
It's still done one-on-one, person to person. If it were such a broad and easy way to send it across the bow, we would have already have reinvented that wheel. However, that wheel is still the same, which is get out there, get active, engage.
Sure. The way I always used to try to engage people was to ask them what they did in their life, and then just explain to them how cannabis connected into that element of whatever it is they did, because cannabis is like a hub, and its spokes touch almost all aspects of life. It's just, you have to see what interests them, and it doesn't matter if they're a chemist or a paper maker, or they're into, sewing fabrics, or whatever they're into, you can almost find an angle with cannabis. And I think once they find their angle, then they go from there.
And I found that focusing on the leadership and there was a time when, of course, and when I say a time, I'm talking about in the recent 5 years, because clearly in the last 20 years, anybody who gave a fuck, I would give them 3 hours of my time just because they were interested. That ship has way sailed. But having said that, in the last 5 years, in the more recent past, these leaders are now calling me and asking me to speak to these organizations. But prior to that, after forming Hemp Ace, and at the end when I really started to get burnt out on my senior paralegal career, was just reaching out to be able to, can I speak at your organization? Can I talk about industrial hemp? And getting to the leaders and the civic leaders and farmers, because once it's okay with them, all of a sudden you start to see the industries percolate. And having said that, I have spoken in front of textile trade associations as well before here, and it's important to reach out to that leadership, but really to get to our civic leaders and to see and to feel in Washington. I can't speak for the other states, but to see and to feel that they're ready, that they're receptive, they're not shunning you at all. Half the time they're like, we were going to call you, or we're so glad to hear you call, and it would be great to have you speak. And so those things are happening. But as Etienne says, it requires that activist, that grassroots activist, to be there, to make themselves available. I've worked very hard to be the go-to person in Washington State. But in terms of that receptacle, Martin, that you speak of, where can we point them to on the web? That's a legitimate, fucking awesome question and idea. And I'll go back to the HIA. I am waving that flag. But again, understand that the founders of the HIA are in my heart. I find, for me, the founders of the HIA, it is even an extension of the cream of the crop of the rainbow family, if I'm going to get super crazy hippie on you. And believe me, I am super crazy hippie. So I believe in it, and I'm not going to give up on that vision. I think we're just getting started with the HIA, and the website is going through a tremendous overhaul. Super side note, maybe even an inside note, but I don't have any, nobody told me not to say this. But we lost a bunch of fucking old data and all this. We changed to this new Apricot software for the HIA website, and Colleen is trying so hard. Again, she just was hired on January 8th to 2 lawsuits, crazy, growing pains. So she's amazing trying to get her footing here. But we're doing an overhaul of that website. My dream is that we'll be able to have a place for legislators to go to, specifically for civic leaders. And you're right, it doesn't exist right now. It needs to.
Good points, Joy.
Yeah, and never in the history, I think, well, always, or in contrast, always in the history has it been that the people have had to lead the leaders. There's no two ways about it, because the lobbyists are leading them in a very different direction from where honesty and science should be taking them.
Yeah, I just had another notion that popped into my mind about these days. There's a lot of people that smoke weed that don't know anything about hemp, or don't know any. But it seems like when you're high, you can open your mind up to it. But there's also apps that the people use on their phone. All the kids are into these apps, and there's like Leafly or some of the others that talk about cannabis varieties, information about cannabis. It seems like maybe there's an opportunity there to throw our legitimate information into some of this more recreational.
Well, can I joke with you? I've said to many people, all it takes is a little 1-letter mess up from typing HELP into HEMP and hitting enter and clicking on friggin' Wikipedia and reading. And that's all it takes. And you know what? I think that it's fucked up that we don't hold our now elected officials to a higher level of accountability, because now they're all walking around with these fucking iPhones in their hand. And
Right.
when I started this, we had to hang out at Kinko's to give them copies of books that were in the Library of Congress that they hadn't seen, and tell them about Hemp for Victory, which they'd never heard of. And now they can Google that shit and be done with it. And I think that there's no way that these people should get away with acting ignorant towards our history or the realities of cannabis anymore because of that little fact. I mean, it doesn't take a hippie like me showing up with Jack in a van fucking and handing them fucking copies from Kinko's to understand our position anymore. I mean, they can go to reputable sources. There's more information on the U.S. Department of Agriculture's website about hemp and hemp history than I've ever photocopied, and I've photocopied a shit ton.
Yeah, I think
The best thing we could do is anybody who converts somebody, be it for medical use, industrial use, if you really help them see the light, insist they pay you back by doing one thing: convert 10 other people.
We're making our own hemp pyramid scheme, people. You're going to make this happen. It's going to be made out of hempcrete.
And remember to send $1 to my mail address, 649999.
Pueblo, Colorado. Yes, that's a self-addressed stuff down to Pueblo, Colorado.
Well, you know, though, doesn't it take us all talking to one another? I mean, this is really what we have to do, is just be proactive, you know, and if, but now more than ever, more and more people are being proactive. And I do believe we're at a tipping point, without question. I think we're at a situation where there's so much money on the table in such an obvious way. There's so many people that are interested in making this happen that it's the future. I mean, you know, as we're having this conversation, I was looking at the website for the Kentucky people, and it's incredible. I mean, what's really going on.
Todd, for years I said if we wanted marijuana legalized by the white middle class majority, what we needed to do was to prove it worked like Viagra. Then all the old white guys would vote for it in a hot second. Well, what we got instead is it's being legalized, and white business guys and anybody else who's interested in business, they're jumping on it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, it's really beautiful to see fields and fields of cannabis growing in America, you know, and it's amazing to look at these colas, you know, swaying in the breeze. It's beautiful. I mean, I think this is the future. I mean, this is the hemp car, you know, and it looks just so incredible next to the fully flowering hemp varieties behind it.
Yeah, that's super encouraging. What's going on in Kentucky? It sounds like there's going to be new things that are going to pop up. The Americans always do things great. So, you know, I have to leave this conference call at the moment. I've got another appointment at 2:00. But it's been really awesome to talk to you folks, and I will hope to do this again. I'm going to stay in touch with Mark and maybe next Sunday or the day after that. But I feel like you're a community of people that might actually be able to get some stuff done, and that we could maybe keep things going in the right direction. So I appreciate all your time, and hope to do this again sometime soon.
Well, thank you for joining us. Mark had to dip out because of his connection issue, but we were all really grateful that you joined us.
Right.
Martin,
Yeah.
a real honor, a real honor. I do hope we cross paths again.
Yeah, I hope so too. All of you people are very informative, and I'm sure that this will go on again. But so anyway, I got to.
Let me know if you ever have any chemistry questions.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
we'll do.
Mad respect, Martin. Carry on, keep on what you're doing. We look forward to the next time.
Super. Talk to you soon.
No, and also, Joy, thank you for joining us. You know, it was really interesting hearing what's going on. You know, your experience is undeniable in this industry, you know, so it's interesting to hear your perspective. And, you know, hopefully, I think we're all, you know, rooting for it to move in all directions. And it's good to see freedom finally happening. It seems like such a distant concept 20 years ago, and now people are actually fighting for cannabis equality.
The tipping point, you know, the 100th monkey, it has happened, and it certainly has happened in marijuana. It's fascinating, you know, when there's media all over Seattle and, you know, constantly giving my card and saying, as soon as industrial hemp becomes as sexy as marijuana, you know, give me a call, because it's the trillion.
Stop with the marijuana, please. My gosh, educate yourself.
So
Cannabis.
I love this conversation. I was hoping we would get there. So if I was any more educated, my head would explode, brother. So here's the thing. I actually, and I understand the controversy, but I actually want to reclaim the word. You understand that I travel, and I'm sure you do too.
No controversy, ma'am. No controversy whatsoever. It's the cannabis sativa plant. Please call it.
I hear you. And so, and when we get a bunch of marijuana folks in Canada, for example, at the Kansas.
No such thing as marijuana. Marijuana is a politicized term that you shouldn't be using on this program, Joy. Sorry.
I'm going to explain, and we can go ahead and have this conversation, and I'm so happy to have the opportunity to have it with you. And that that when we discuss cannabis, say we're at the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance with a bunch of hemp farmers that really don't, most of the folks in the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance don't have any idea about what marijuana is. So we'll have so when we talk about cannabis, when we're in a hemp situation, we're talking about industrial hemp. So it's really about using a dictionary. So when we say cannabis and hemp, we're actually saying cannabis and cannabis, or hemp and hemp. And hear me out here, brother. So on top of it, I travel all around, and I go and I speak at conferences internationally. And our Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters are offended, brother, at why all of a sudden there's this sort of hippie consciousness in America that marijuana, which to them is a beautiful sacred word, which etymology is actually rooted in agriculture for a 7-leaf plant. We're offending them. They don't understand why all of a sudden that is a dirty word, when to them it is a beautiful, sacred, and sacramental word. For that reason alone, I would want to reclaim it. But for the much larger reason, for a bunch of fat white men in the 1930s to take away my right to loudly and proudly use this sacred Spanish word, I will never let fat white special interests from the 1930s, Angel.
Hey, I'm fat.
Okay, well, I wouldn't.
I'm white, okay? I'm fat, I'm white. I'm offended by that.
And I apologize for offending you.
Can I say something, actually?
Come on, let's go.
I gotta say, you know what, Mark?
I want to hear it so I can level it. Let's go. Come on, let's go.
Can I say something, you guys?
Yes.
You know what? Look, you know, it almost doesn't matter if you call it weed, chronic, you know, ganja, marijuana. I mean, depending on where you're standing, it's what it is to the person that's understanding it. If you're talking about it scientifically, sure, call it cannabis. I mean,
I would call it medical or recreation. That's the thing. If you want to addiction,
again, hold on. Let me repeat my thought, Joy. The reality is that it's a descriptive word, and it's nothing we should be afraid of. I mean, the reality is that, you know, fake news has been used against cannabis for 100 years. And it's not the same. I mean, you know, the big thing, Mark, that I think people should do is communicate. And the reality is if you say marijuana to somebody who is, you know, from Mexico, they'll understand completely what it is you're talking about. And part of the problem, I think, going back to the 30s, is they called it that because, and I've pointed this out to many people, that you couldn't go look that up. At the time in the 1930s that the government called it marijuana, you couldn't go look in the Department of Agriculture and find a plant called marijuana, because it was a slang word, just like Dr. Dre called it chronic. And you know, it was a great way to mislead people, and that was why most of the people who testified actually against the Tax Act didn't learn until right before the hearings that it was actually cannabis hemp that they were calling marijuana, and they protested that to no avail. I mean, the American Medical Association, the American hemp seed manufacturers that were making paints at the time and selling bird seed with it, were there testifying that birds wouldn't foliate properly if they didn't have hemp seed in their diet. And I mean, this has been honestly a huge part of the problem. But now, Mark, I mean, the reality is we do have Google, and if you say marijuana, people can look it up and they can cross-reference the terms, and depending on how they're talking about the particular application of cannabis would be the best way to use a descriptive term that applies to that use. And marijuana is just one more of them, and you shouldn't take such great offense at it.
But I do apologize for saying fat white brother. I won't use that again. I'll just keep it to special interest.
I happen to be fat and I happen to be white. Sorry about that.
Brother.
I also hold on a second. Not with the brother. Hold on. Look, I'm a scientist, right? I classify plants according to the way they're classified by science. It's the plant Cannabis sativa, so we call it cannabis. If you want to call it marijuana, that's fine, but you're probably not talking in the right audience to really, you know, this audience prefers cannabis. We've had this discussion several hash churches ago. We're all basically cannabis purists, cannabis enthusiasts, and I feel your energy, sister. I mean, but I would just say that, you know, maybe tone down your rhetoric a little bit. We get it. I get it. But I think that it's better.
It's kind of the issue for dictionary, where I would say medical cannabis or adult use cannabis, because otherwise when we say cannabis, and the taxonomy slide is the one that I start with whether I'm teaching lawyers, farmers, students, citizens, civic leaders, whatever it is, we always have the taxonomy slide, and it's Cannabaceae, then the genus cannabis, then these various divergent subspecies, which don't really matter. It's the type.
And that's the truth. And that's what should be taught, not the word marijuana. We should strike that from the human vernacular, so the people who are born on this day forward do not hear the word marijuana associated with the cannabis plant. Okay.
But Mark, can I stop you? Go to Tijuana, bro. You're not taking it out of the vocabulary of Baja. Marijuana is what it's called, and you know, don't be mad at it. It's just what it is. I mean, I used to live in San Diego.
I'm just throwing some energy into the discussion.
Go to Encinitas, go to Rosaritos.
I think we should grind up.
Man, you know?
I think we should grind up all the marijuana and make hash out of it and smoke it.
I second that. I'll also say, and this is fascinating, you guys, that one of our clients is the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church, the Rastafarians that formed, you know, this Supreme Court law here in America and in Jamaica. They're the second largest landholders in Jamaica. And so when I was hired to work with Andrea Herman for them, as soon as the Dangerous Drug Act amendment passed in February of 2015, I then got into the Dangerous Drug Act is the Jamaican version of the Controlled Substances Act. And so what changed in February of 2017 was called the Dangerous Drug Act Amendment, at which point they legalized sacramental ganja, medical ganja, and industrial hemp. But their legalized term there is ganja. But that doesn't keep me from using the word ganja, because that is somehow demonized there, you know. So I'm just trying to tell you how all of that stuff plays out. And I completely respect. I have some of my best friends, Mark, that they get into it with me the same way that you do. And when they hear me say,
no, we've had this discussion on Hash Church, and you know, a lot of it like ensemble versus entourage, marijuana versus cannabis. I mean, these are the kind of things that we're trying to educate people on, and I think everyone on here is passionate about it.
Right, but you don't want to flip out on Dr. Dre for calling something fucking chronic, right? I mean,
can I fucking finish, Todd? Hold on. So,
what are you smoking? Hold up. Take a deep breath. Zen for a minute with us. We need Darren is what we need. Jesus
you need to take another hit of that.
You need a bong hit, man.
I think my problem is I'm out of my time zone or something.
Well, welcome back, bro. You can come visit me for a weekend. I'll straighten you out.
I just wanted to finish my thought before you interrupted, which was, I feel Joy's passion and I love it. And I just like to drive this notion that we were talking about before, which it's in all of our benefit to be the educators. And the educators, to me, have to do whatever we can to dispel the notions of prohibition. And so what I like to think of is, again, whether you use the word cannabis or marijuana it's a personal choice and everything. But I would like to know that, like, the people who are on this panel understand that scientifically it's the plant Cannabis sativa and all that. So what we want to do is we want to accurately say what we're talking about and not put a name on it that was made to demonize it and all the stuff that happened after that, which is why we ended up having the word in our vernacular. And again, I believe if we could switch this over to cannabis, we could just be getting people to start thinking about changing that mentality. And I think that that's part of our job. Todd.
But we have, Doctor, and we have for a long. Go ahead, Sam.
Actually, Mark, cannabis sativa is really just for industrial hemp. Cannabis indica is all drug varieties, be they widely.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, Sam. I meant ...
No problem. No problem, Mark. I'm just trying to help.
Yeah, you know. So Joy. I mean, I feel your energy, and I love it. And I think we just, as panelists on this program, which gets a lot of views from people who are just learning about the plant and just beginning to understand about it. It's just, something that, I just take a little, not militantly, but just a little try to responsibility to make sure that we all understand that this is how the plant should be called. It should be called by its real name and not this, other name. And we've talked this issue to death.
Sure. And
can I, Joyce, can I say this? So in relation to having in everything in context, right? Mark, I mean, because really you got to take things in context. And when you are in a room having a conversation about hemp and you refer to cannabis, then you have to further define what you mean by the use of the word cannabis. But if you say the marijuana market, people would understand that you meant like the I-502 market, the adult use of sales, that whole side of it, because in all reality, that's what that sub-definition would mean. So in context, it could actually help to clarify what it was you're trying to make a point about, because in reality, this is what they're having these conversations about now. It's apples and oranges, but you got to describe the orange. And if you just say citrus or, fruit, because cannabis would be like saying fruit. And now you got to further define what fruit. So in some ways, the use of the word could be quite beneficial.
It's going to
It boils down to, and as I often say, you're either saying medical cannabis, adult use cannabis, or industrial cannabis, and then it just gets to where it's too many syllables. An analogy is, in Seattle, there are so many agnostics and atheists that you don't ever want to use the word God. And my God is like just some universal intelligence, whatever, made up of many different things. But if I want to say that, I have to use all these syllables, and I'd rather just say God, but then I'll offend everybody, so I don't fucking say it all.
I have a suggestion, Joy. I've changed the word God in my vernacular to dog, because I love dog. I love my dog. So whenever I think, God bless you, I say dog bless you.
I'm taking that.
I just changed the word God to dog, and it totally makes sense, at least in my life.
But wait a minute. My cat objects to this.
Well, your cat's a pussy.
That's true.
I want to know what kind of aggressive hash you're making over there with Chris over here. It's like, yeah, usually cannabis calms one down, but you're over here like hyped up like you're fucking Floyd Merriweather or something.
Dude, I'm out of my time zone. I just recovered from a 48-hour stomach bug. I'm full of life. I had my first solid meal last night. Had a nice New York strip steak at a nice steakhouse. I'm ready to rock.
You're in California, go to the beach, to have a sunset, take in some negative ions, bro.
Eat frozen yogurt with kale.
Truth be told, I worship every second that I have in this building right here between now and my flight back home on Tuesday, because, the opportunity for me to work with Chris, I mean, Chris is brilliant. Those of you who don't know Chris, we're talking about Chris Barone. From Clear, and so have the opportunity for two chemists like us to get together and collaborate like this is just I've been waiting all my life for this, really.
Let me guess, you guys had a chemistry together?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's just a great opportunity, because there's a lot of people who are going to come in on our heels, and we need to establish, that we're going to be the people who are going to do this, and not some big douchebags from pharmaceutical industry.
No, proper terminology is important, but I don't get mad at any of the words. I don't care if it's chronic or ganja or marijuana or moto or whatever the hell they're calling it. As long as we're communicating about what it is we're talking about, I'm kind of happy at this point. And as the markets develop, it is helpful to have description that would describe a market like the marijuana market, and we all would understand that, or the hemp market, and we would all understand that. You say the cannabis market, and it seems all encompassing to me. You know, sounds like you could be talking about anything.
And unfortunately or fortunately, my life revolves around its legal support and legal stuff and dealing with the law. And because it's two completely separate areas of law, understand that that's another reason why, for me in particular, in my line of work and my career choice, where the distinction has to be huge. So unfortunately, if I just say cannabis, I'm talking about two completely separate areas of law with different rules, and I have to deal with the stupid rule part. And they're different. I can't wait till they're the same. We got lots more work to do, guys.
No, we got to melt down the walls. You're right. And it all will be cannabis someday. It'll all just be, won't matter. It'll be fields of, you know, high quality ganja growing, just like there's low quality hemp growing for something else. And yeah, I think it will be cool. Well, I want to thank you all for joining. We're kind of a little past where we usually end, and it's Sunday and it's nice out, so I hope we can all go enjoy ourselves. And, you know, thank you for everybody watching. And Mark will be back on next week. His internet sucked. So yeah. Does anybody have?
I really appreciate being on the show, guys. Thank you so much. It's really an honor. You're just Etienne, Todd. Really, Todd. We didn't meet back in the '90s. I just knew who you were, brother, and you're my hero. And you've done jail time. You're an amazing activist. So many people on this that participate on the panel. Obviously, everybody here. Just thank you very much for having me. It's really my honor to interact with you.
Well, thank you very much. You know, it's been really nice to hear what you had to say. And Mark, thanks for bringing Chris on for sure.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for letting us join.
Oh, it was pretty
nice
cool.
Nice meeting you, Joy. Please don't take any offense at anything. I was just having fun.
Believe me, brother. I love you, brother. It's so all good. I trust.
I'm an entertainer, and part of this is to create a little entertainment on here. It makes the show less boring.
Dig it. Dig it. Totally.
Well, cool. Well, everybody have a great day. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And Mark, have fun wherever you are. Peace.